Hey guys, tonight we wander into a sun-washed afternoon in the ancient kingdom of Kush, where the air shimmers above sandstone walls, and somewhere beyond the acacia trees, a small furnace hums like the world's earliest space heater. You stand in the city of Meru capital, of a civilization that most school textbooks speed past on their way to Egypt, which feels a bit unfair considering this place once supplied so much gold that even pharaohs raised an impressed eyebrow. The desert stretches pale and endless behind you, but here along the Nile's curve, life gathers in a stubborn ribbon of green. You can almost taste the dust and sunlight. It's warm, dry, and deceptively calm, though you probably wouldn't survive this without a solid hydration plan and a deep respect for the sun. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a courtyard workshop, its mud brick walls warm to the touch. The year is somewhere around the 1st century BCE, give or take a few scholarly debates and a broken sundial. The kingdom of Kush is powerful, so powerful that not long ago, its rulers even clashed with the expanding Roman Empire. Mainstream historians agreed that Kush, centered in what is now Sudan, rose to prominence partly because of its control over rich gold deposits. In fact, gold was so abundant in Nubia that the ancient Egyptians called the region Toseti, land of the bow, and depended heavily on its southern neighbor's mineral wealth. But right now, you're not on a battlefield or in a throne room. You're here for something softer, steadier, a calm afternoon with Goldsmiths. The workshop is shaded by woven reed mats. A breeze carries the scent of charcoal and warm metal. You hear a steady tapping tap-tap, tap the kind of rhythm that could lull you to sleep if it weren't also shaping treasure. A goldsmith sits cross-legged on a low stool, bare feet, dusty, posture relaxed in a way that suggests he has been doing this since before you knew how to hold a spoon. Gold dust glints in shallow bowls near his elbow. It's gathered from nuggets and/or mined farther south and east, likely from desert regions that still hide ancient shafts. Some mines were so extensive that archaeologists have found entire networks of tunnels and stone hammers left behind. Historians still argue whether Kushite gold production surpassed that of contemporary Egypt during certain peaks. But there's no doubt it was immense. You crouch beside the artisan, and he doesn't look up. He's used to observers, apprentices, customers, perhaps even officials, ensuring a fair portion goes to the royal treasury. The kingdom of Kush wasn't shy about taxing resources, and gold was its glittering backbone. Somewhere in the city, administrators tally ingots and tribute, but here, the focus is on detail. The goldsmith lifts a small lump of metal with bronze tongs. It's dull now, not yet the radiant thing you picture in museums. That shine comes later. He studies it with the patience of someone who understands that rushing gold is like arguing with a cat. Technically possible, but not recommended. You notice how quiet the atmosphere feels. Yes, there's life beyond the walls, donkeys braying. Traders calling, but inside this courtyard, time slows. A clay furnace rests in the corner, cold for the moment, like a sleepy dragon that only occasionally remembers it breathes fire. In a few hours, it will glow. Meru itself hums with layered cultures. The Kushites have absorbed and reshaped influences from ancient Egypt, especially during the earlier Nabatean period, when Kushite kings even ruled as pharaohs over Egypt's 25th dynasty. That's a mainstream historical fact your old history teacher may have glossed over. Imagine being so successful you briefly run your powerful neighbor's country. Casual, but the style here is distinct. The script carved on nearby pottery isn't hieroglyphs, but Meroitic, a writing system scholars can partially read, but still don't fully understand. It's one of those tantalizing mysteries. Historians still argue whether Meroitic belongs to the Nilo-Saharan language family or represents something entirely separate. So as you watch gold shaped into beauty, remember, the very words spoken around you remain partly hidden from modern ears. A young apprentice sweeps the ground carefully, collecting stray filings. Gold is too precious to waste. Every fleck matters. You get the sense that if you sneezed at the wrong moment, 3 people would dive heroically to rescue airborne glitter. There's no industrial vacuum here, just vigilance and a very attentive broom. The afternoon light shifts, angling through the reed shade and striping the courtyard floor. A shallow basin of water reflects the sky, and you dip your fingers in. It's cool, drawn from the Nile not long ago. That river, lifeline of civilizations, is why this city thrives at all. Without it, this would be endless sand and ambitious lizards. You glance toward the workshop entrance. Beyond it, pyramids rise in the distance, steeper and smaller than their Egyptian cousins, but unmistakable. Yes, pyramids. The rulers of Kush built dozens near Meru, a mainstream fact that still surprises many people who assume pyramids begin and end in Egypt. These structures guard royal burials filled, at times, with gold objects crafted in courtyards like this one, and so the calmness deepens. The goldsmith finally looks up, measuring you with a quiet, almost amused gaze, as if to say, "You think history is loud, but most of it is afternoons like this, not battles, not coronations, just steady hands, patient fire, and sunlight crawling across a courtyard wall." You settle onto a low stool, the tapping resumes. The desert waits beyond the city, vast and indifferent. But here, in Meru gold and human intention, meet in a quiet dance that will echo for thousands of years, long after the furnace. Cools long after the script fades, long after someone else stands in this same dust and wonders who once sat exactly where you are now. The tapping continues, steady as a heartbeat, and the courtyard seems to breathe with it. You shift slightly on your low stool, careful not to disturb the careful arrangement of tools spread across a woven mat. This is where the afternoon truly settles, in not dramatic, not hurried, just the quiet choreography of preparation. One of the goldsmiths rises and moves to a wooden chest tucked against the mud brick wall. He opens it with a soft scrape, revealing neatly bundled cloths, coils of thin wire, and small leather pouches tied with string. The tools come out one by one, each placed deliberately. A rounded hammer with a polished stone head, bronze chisels of varying widths, slender awls for piercing, and a pair of tongs whose grip has been shaped by years of heat. Nothing flashy, nothing ornamental, just instruments worn smooth by repetition. Mainstream archaeology confirms that Kushite artisans used relatively simple but highly effective toolkit stone and metal hammers, clay molds, crucibles, and blowpipes to intensify furnace heat. No electric polishers, no laser cutters, just human breath, steady hands, and a lot of patience. You can't help but think that if modern craft stores had a 1st century BC aisle, it would look suspiciously like this mat. The goldsmith kneels and begins inspecting each tool. He runs a thumb along a chisel's edge, squints at its alignment, and nods faintly. Maintenance is half the craft. A dull edge would bruise the gold instead of persuading it, and gold, you learn quickly, prefers persuasion. In the far corner, the small clay furnace beehive shaped in waist-high weights, like a quiet guest at a party. A younger apprentice begins arranging charcoal inside it, stacking the pieces with surprising care. The charcoal comes from local acacia wood, slow burned to produce steady heat. Historians still argue whether Kushite furnaces reached temperatures comparable to those of contemporary Mediterranean workshops, but the surviving crucibles suggest they achieved more than enough to melt and refine gold effectively. You watch as another artisan takes a shallow bowl of powdered ore and sets it near the furnace. Not all gold arrives as tidy nuggets. Some comes mixed with sand and rock, requiring washing, crushing, and smelting. The Nile plays a crucial role here. Gold-bearing sediments wash downstream, and panning techniques similar, in principle, to what prospectors would use thousands of years. Later separate heavier flakes from lighter debris. It's almost comforting to realize that across millennia, humans still swirl pans of water and hope for sparkle. A light breeze stirs the reed mats overhead, and you catch the faint smell of charcoal dust. It's not unpleasant earthy dry, oddly soothing. The courtyard walls mute the sounds of the larger city, but faint marketplace calls drift in. Somewhere nearby, traders bargain over ivory or iron tools. Meru was famous not only for gold, but also for iron production. In fact, archaeologists have uncovered vast slag heaps nearby, evidence of large-scale ironworking that earned the city a reputation as an industrial hub of its era. You imagine ancient visitors thinking, ah, yes, the city of pyramids and surprisingly efficient metallurgy. Back in the courtyard, a small stone slab is placed in the center. This will serve as an anvil of sorts. It's not massive, just solid enough to absorb impact without complaint. The goldsmith sprinkles a pinch of fine sand across its surface, perhaps to prevent slipping, or maybe it's just habit. With ancient artisans, ritual and practicality tend to overlap in ways we can't always untangle. You notice how little anyone speaks. Instructions are given with nods and brief phrases. Apprentices respond quickly, adjusting posture, fetching water, arranging molds. There's a rhythm here, almost monastic. If productivity apps had existed, this courtyard would have ignored them completely. One of the more curious items laid out is a small clay mold carved with delicate pattern spirals, lotus petals, tiny raised dots. These molds allow molten gold to take preliminary shapes before further refinement. Quirky tidbit. Some researchers have suggested that certain repetitive dot patterns in Kushite jewelry might have held symbolic meaning beyond decoration, possibly representing stars or fertility motifs, though concrete proof remains elusive. It's one of those details that makes you squint thoughtfully and say, maybe. While scholars gently debate at conferences, the furnace is lit. A spark catches the charcoal, and soon a low orange glow pulses inside the clay chamber. An apprentice kneels with a long blowpipe, a simple tube, through which he directs steady breaths into the base of the fire. Each exhale intensifies the heat, its manual bellows powered by lungs and determination. You briefly consider how long you could do that before feeling dizzy. Probably not long. You would make a very unimpressive ancient assistant. As the fire strengthens, a crucible's small, rounded, darkened from repeated uses placed within the furnace. Inside it rests a measured portion of gold fragments. The metal doesn't melt immediately, it resists, stubborn in its solid state. But slowly, under consistent heat, it softens, edges rounding, surfaces gleaming. Mainstream fact, gold S relatively low melting point about 1064 degrees. Celsius makes it more workable than metals like iron. This property contributed significantly to its early and widespread use in jewelry and ritual objects across ancient civilizations, including Kush. It's rare, beautiful, and surprisingly cooperative under heat. A winning combination, you feel the warmth reaching your face now. Gentle but persistent. The air shimmers slightly above the furnace opening. The goldsmith leans in, eyes narrowed, reading the color of the flame the way a modern chef reads a stovetop. No thermometers, just experience. Historians still argue whether Kushite goldsmiths learned certain advanced techniques independently or through Egyptian influence during earlier centuries of close contact. The truth may be a blend cultural exchange flowing as naturally as the Nile itself. You imagine ideas traveling alongside caravans, tucked between sacks of grain and coils of rope. The afternoon deepens. Tools gleam softly in the angled light. The furnace hums. The gold begins to surrender to heat, edges liquefying into a small, radiant pool. And in this shaded courtyard, preparation gives way to transformation. Not rushed, not dramatic, just steady and inevitable, like the slow drift toward sleep. The gold in the crucible softens further, rounding into a molten bead that glows like a captured sunset. You lean in carefully, not to close hand. Feel that steady breath of heat against your cheeks. It's mesmerizing, the way solid certainty turns fluid under patient fire. And as you watch the metal transform, your thoughts drift outward, following its journey backward through desert and river to where it first left the earth. Because this small glowing pool did not begin here in the courtyard of Meru. It began miles away, in harsh terrain where the wind doesn't politely knock before rearranging your entire campsite. Mainstream historians agree that the kingdom of Kush controlled rich gold deposits in Nubia, particularly in the eastern desert between the Nile and the Red Sea. Ancient mining sites, some predating Kush but later expanded, have revealed stone hammers, grinding stones, and abandoned shafts. You picture miners descending narrow tunnels by flickering torchlight, chipping quartz veins from rock faces. Not glamorous, not serene. Definitely not an afternoon you'd volunteer for, unless someone promised you unlimited shade and snacks. Gold mining in antiquity was labor-intensive, or had to be extracted, crushed with stone pestles, and then washed to separate heavier gold particles from lighter debris. Sometimes entire families might be involved in washing sediments along seasonal streams. The work was repetitive, gritty, and required the patience of someone willing to swirl muddy water for hours just to glimpse a flash of yellow. If you think scrolling endlessly on your phone is a time commitment, Imagine panning sand in 40-degree heat. And yet, the result of all that effort sits here now, liquefying calmly in a clay crucible. A goldsmith beside you murmurs something to the apprentice at the blowpipe. The young man adjusts his breathing rhythm, shorter bursts now, increasing the heat. The molten gold shivers slightly, surface rippling like a tiny sunlit pond. You're struck by how controlled everything feels. There's no frantic, energy-just, deliberate action. The gold may have come from brutal landscapes, but here it's treated with almost meditative respect. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient sources describe Nubia as so rich in gold that it seemed inexhaustible. Later, legends exaggerated wildly, suggesting rivers that ran over golden sands in abundance. While that's poetic, archaeologists have found real evidence of extensive extraction enough that ancient Egypt relied heavily on Nubian mines during its imperial height. You imagine caravans moving northward along desert tracks, donkeys laden with sacks of ore, guards scanning horizons for raiders, the Nile glinting nearby, offering both transport and life. Kush's strategic position along trade routes gave it enormous leverage. Control the gold, and you influence diplomacy, warfare, and temple construction far beyond your borders. Historians still argue whether Kush's wealth from gold directly funded its architectural boom in Marutha pyramids, temples, and administrative complexes, or whether iron production played an equally decisive role. It's likely both intertwined, resources reinforcing one another. Wealth begets infrastructure, which begets more wealth. A cycle as old as civilization itself. The crucible is lifted carefully from the furnace using long tongs. The gold inside is fully molten now, a brilliant, viscous glow. It almost seems alive. You instinctively hold your breath as the artisan moves toward a prepared clay mold resting on the stone slab. The mold is simple, two halves pressed together, carved with a shallow channel leading into a cavity shaped like a thick disc. This is just the first stage, a manageable ingot that can later be hammered, stretched, and coaxed into finer forms. Gold's malleability is legendary. A single gram can be hammered into a sheet covering a square meter. That's not poetic exaggeration, it's measurable fact. You picture ancient artisans discovering this property and collectively thinking, oh, this is going to be useful. The molten gold pours in a smooth, continuous stream. It fills the cavity with a soft hiss. No dramatic sparks, no cinematic explosion, just a gentle settling, like tea filling a cup. You half expect applause, but the workshop remains respectfully quiet. As the mold cools, you glance toward the courtyard entrance. Beyond it, Meru continues its day. Traders haggle, children chase each other in dusty lanes. Somewhere, a scribe scratches Meroitic characters into pottery shards. That script, still only partially deciphered today, adds a layer of mystery to everything around you. We can measure the gold's melting point with scientific precision, yet the voices of the people shaping it remain partly veiled. It's humbling. The goldsmith cracks the mold open once the metal has solidified enough to handle. Inside rests a warm, matte disc, unpolished, unassuming. If you saw it on the ground, you might mistake it for a dull pebble, but you know better. You watched it glow like a star moments ago. He places the disc onto the stone slab. The hammer comes next. Tap, tap, tap. Gentle at first, flattening, widening. Gold spreads obediently, thinning without breaking. You can almost sense its structure, yielding atoms, sliding past one another. No one here talks about atomic lattice, of course. They talk about feel, about listening to the metal. Mainstream archaeological finds from Kushite burial sites show beautifully worked gold jewelry earrings, rings, amulets suggesting that workshops like this mastered advanced shaping techniques. These weren't crude trinkets. They were refined, symmetrical, and often intricately detailed. A light breeze cools the sweat at your temple. The furnace still glows softly behind you, but its most intense work is done for now. The transformation from ore to workable form is complete. What began as hidden veins in distant rock now lies under a hammer, slowly becoming possibility. You realize something quietly profound. Most of history isn't explosive, it's accumulative. Gold dust gathered grain by grain, or crushed stone by stone, heat applied breath by breath. And in this shaded courtyard, on an otherwise ordinary afternoon, wealth moves from earth to empire through steady hands and unhurried intention. The tapping continues, measured and calm, as the once molten disc grows thinner and wider beneath each patient strike. The hammering softens into a slower rhythm as the gold disc thins, and your attention drifts back to the furnace, which still radiates a low, patient heat. It's not dramatic, no roaring blaze like in fantasy epics, just a steady orange glow inside a rounded clay chamber. This is where the real alchemy of the afternoon happens, and it's surprisingly scientific for a structure made of mud brick and optimism. You shuffle closer, feeling warmth seep into your knees through the packed earth. The furnace stands about waist high, its exterior patched and repatched over years of use. Soot stains climb its sides like dark ivy. At the base, small vents allow air to flow in, feeding the charcoal. The apprentice returns to the blowpipe, kneeling with monk-like dedication. He exhales in controlled bursts, cheeks puffing slightly, directing air into the embers. Each breath brightens the coals from red to nearly white hot. Mainstream archaeology confirms that ancient Kushite furnaces relied on charcoal and forced airfon from blowpipes or simple bellows to reach high temperatures. While iron working required even more intense heat, gold's relatively modest melting point meant this smaller setup was more than adequate. No thermostats, no gauges, just a practiced eye reading the color of flame. You can't help to imagine modern engineers staring in respectful disbelief. The goldsmith leans over the furnace opening, squinting at the coals. He doesn't flinch. His eyebrows, thankfully, have survived many afternoons like this. You suspect he has the reflexes of someone who knows exactly when to lean back. You, on the other hand, would probably singe something important within 5 minutes. He gestures for a crucible, another small clay cup, darkened and slightly cracked from previous firings. Crucibles are essential. They hold the gold during melting and refining, protecting it from direct contact with charcoal. Some excavated crucibles from the Meru region still show traces of gold residue, silent witnesses to countless transformations. Holding one would feel like holding a fossilized afternoon. A small handful of additional gold fragments is added to the crucible. Not all of it is pure. Ancient gold often contained natural alloy silver and copper, mixed in varying proportions. Sometimes this was intentional, creating electrum, a pale gold-silver alloy valued in the ancient world. Historians still argue whether Kushite goldsmiths deliberately adjusted alloy compositions for color variation or primarily worked with naturally occurring blends. Either way, the subtle tonal differences in surviving jewelry suggest a nuanced understanding of material properties. The crucible returns to the furnace. The apprentice resumes his careful breathing. You notice how the rhythm mirrors the tapping from earlier. Inhale, exhale, glow brightens. There's something almost meditative about it. If ancient workshops had wellness retreats, this would be the focused breath for metallurgical excellence session. Heat builds steadily. You feel it along your forearms, a gentle pressure rather than a harsh blast. The clay walls insulate well, keeping the intensity directed inward. The furnace design is simple but clever, compact enough to conserve fuel, efficient enough to maintain temperature. Kushite metallurgists were not improvising amateurs. They operated within a long tradition of technical knowledge, refined over generations. Quirky tidbit: some researchers have proposed that the extensive iron production in Meru may have contributed to localized deforestation due to charcoal demand. The idea paints a slightly less tranquil picture: smoke rising, trees felled, but evidence remains debated. The surrounding savanna could regenerate, and trade may have supplemented fuel supplies. It's one of those reminders that even ancient industries had environmental footprints. Though perhaps without the social media debates, the goldsmith reaches for a long-handled stirring rod, gently touching the molten surface inside the crucible. The liquid metal swirls lazily, thick and luminous. You half expect it to bubble like soup, but gold melts with a quiet dignity. No dramatic theatrics, just steady transformation. Outside the courtyard, a donkey brays loudly. Breaking the calm for a moment, you imagine it protesting the heat, or perhaps offering its own metallurgical advice. More charcoal, it seems to say. The goldsmith ignores it entirely. He has heard worse. As the molten gold reaches the desired consistency, he withdraws the crucible once more. This time, instead of pouring into a simple ingot mold, he approaches a more intricate clay form resting on the stone slab. The mold is carved with shallow grooves and raised ridges, suggesting a decorative element, perhaps a bracelet segment, or the base of a pendant. You feel a small thrill. This is where science meets artistry. He tilts the crucible carefully. The molten stream flows into the mold's narrow channel, filling the carved space with liquid light. A faint hiss rises as metal meets clay. No fireworks, just precision. Mainstream finds from Kushite burial sites reveal gold jewelry adorned with detailed motifs lotus flowers, ram's heads associated with the god Amun, and geometric patterns unique to the region. These objects required not only casting, but also hammering, engraving, and polishing. The furnace is merely the beginning of a longer conversation between metal and maker. Historians still argue whether certain advanced casting techniques in Kush developed independently or were transmitted. Through earlier contact with Egypt and Mediterranean traders, cultural exchange was constant along the Nile corridor. Ideas traveled as readily as goods. You picture a craftsman observing a foreign ornament decades ago and quietly adapting its method here in Meru, blending influences into something distinctly Kushite. The mold cools slowly. The goldsmith doesn't rush it. Patience is part of the process. Remove it too soon, and the shape may warp. Leave it too long, and the afternoon slips away. Timing, as always, is everything. The furnace's glow begins to soften, embers settling into a deeper red. The apprentice rests his blowpipe aside, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. You feel the shift in temperature almost immediately, a subtle easing, like the air exhaling after holding its breath. When the mold is finally opened, a newly formed piece emerges, still rough along the edges. Its surface matte and slightly uneven, but the shape is clear. Purpose is visible. You realize that this calm afternoon is built on mastery of heat, air, and time. Nothing chaotic, nothing rushed. Just a clay furnace, a handful of charcoal, and the quiet confidence of people who understand exactly how much flame is enough. And as the embers dim further, the gold cools in its new form, waiting patiently for the next stage of persuasion. The newly cast piece of gold rests on the stone slab, still warm from the furnace. Its edges are faintly rough where the molten metal met the clay mold. Behind me, the furnace sighs, its intense heat softening into a gentler glow, the embers inside settling like tired fireflies. Now begins the part of the afternoon that feels almost intimate, the careful selection of tools. The subtle choreography of shaping, engraving, and refining. This is where you truly appreciate how much can be accomplished with objects that, at first glance, look like they belong in a very determined camping kit. The goldsmith draws the piece closer and reaches for a small hammer with a rounded stone head. It's not large. In fact, it fits comfortably in his palm, the handle worn smooth by years of use. Beside it lie bronze chisels, some with flat tips, others sharply pointed. A slender awl rests near a coil of thin gold wire, and a burnishing stone gleams softly in the angled light. The toolkit is modest, but in practiced hands, it might as well be an orchestra. Mainstream archaeological discoveries from Kushite sites confirm the use of such compact, versatile tool stone hammers, metal punches, engraving implements, and polishing stones. There's no excess here. Every tool has a purpose, and most serve multiple roles. It makes you imagine modern hardware stores shrinking down to a single woven mat and still somehow getting the job done. The goldsmith positions the cast piece on the stone slab, which serves as a firm anvil. He begins tapping gently along its edge. Gold's remarkable malleability is on full display here. It allows the metal to stretch and flatten without cracking, provided you don't rush it. You feel oddly protective of the piece, as if it might complain if handled too harshly. It doesn't, of course. Gold rarely complains. It simply yields to the artist's will. An apprentice brings forward a small bowl filled with fine sand mixed with powdered stone. This abrasive mixture will later help to smooth the surface. But before that, the goldsmith selects a narrow chisel and lightly incises a guiding line across the metal. The groove is faint at first, almost invisible. He deepens it with careful, steady pressure, carving a delicate border that will soon frame a decorative motif. It's a fascinating detail that some researchers have noted. Certain repetitive border patterns in Kushite jewelry resemble stylized plant forms native to the Nile region. Interestingly, not all of them are botanically accurate. It's possible the artisans were capturing an idea of nature rather than a literal representation. Or perhaps someone once carved a leaf from memory, and everyone else just politely agreed it was close enough. You watch as he switches tools with a seamless, practiced ease. A pointed punch is now in his hand, and he begins to tap tiny indentations along the border, creating a dotted pattern. Each indentation is perfectly and evenly spaced. A feat achieved not by measurement tools as we know them, but by a highly trained eye and years of habit. Historians still argue whether Kushite artisans used standardized measuring cords or primarily relied on a sense of visual symmetry developed through long apprenticeships. Either way, the incredible consistency found in surviving pieces suggests an impressive internal calibration. My own attempts at drawing a straight line suddenly feel deeply inadequate. Nearby, another goldsmith is working on a thin strip of metal, pulling it through a simple draw plate. This is essentially a hard surface, perhaps stone or metal, with a series of small tapering holes. With each pull, the wire is stretched, becoming finer and longer. The process is slow and requires patience. The wire narrows incrementally, and it has to be unill-heated briefly to soften it so it doesn't become brittle and break. Gold's natural softness makes it forgiving, but repeated shaping still demands careful heat management to maintain its integrity. The afternoon light grows warmer, slanting across the courtyard. I notice how the gold reflects it differently at each stage of its transformation. Freshly cast pieces appear muted, their surfaces almost shy. As they are hammered, the surfaces begin to brighten. Polished areas gleam like liquid sunlight. It's as if the metal is waking up gradually, slowly revealing its true personality under the artisan's touch. One tool in particular catches my eye, a smooth oval stone used for burnishing. The goldsmith takes it and begins rubbing it across the surface with firm, repetitive strokes. There are no modern polish compounds, no electric buffers, just pure friction and patience. As he works, the surface begins to shine more vividly, the tiny hammer marks blending together into a cohesive, brilliant glow. It's a powerful reminder that shine wasn't just about appearance in the ancient world. In many cultures, brilliance symbolized divine favor, vitality, and even immortality. Gold's incredible resistance to tarnish made it the perfect metaphor for eternity, a substance that could defy time itself. Here in Kush, jewelry was never merely decoration. It was a language, it signaled status, religious devotion, and political allegiance. The magnificent pieces discovered in elite burials at sites near Meru reveal an astonishing level of intricate craftsmanship. They are clear evidence that workshops just like this one served powerful patrons, the rulers and nobles of the kingdom. Scholars widely recognize that these gold objects accompanied the elite into their tombs, reinforcing their wealth and ensuring their spiritual preparedness for the afterlife. I glance at the coil of fine wire again. The first goldsmith picks it up and begins shaping it into a gentle curve. It might become part of a larger design. The long history of cultural exchange between these two great Nile civilizations left lasting artistic echoes. Though Kushite interpretations often carried a distinct local flair, a unique identity all their own. Historians still debate whether certain motifs were adopted as political statements, way for Kushite rulers to align themselves with established Egyptian divine imagery, or if they simply reflected a long-standing religious syncretism. The debate drifts quietly through academic halls, but here in the courtyard, the design simply takes shape without any fuss. An apprentice moves through the workspace, carefully collecting the tiny gold scraps produced during trimming and filing. In a workshop like this, nothing is wasted. Even the smallest fragments, the glittering dust, will be gathered and remelted later. Efficiency isn't a modern invention. For any precious metal workshop throughout history, it's a fundamental instinct for survival and prosperity. As I watch, I realize that this entire scene is built on the principle of incremental improvement. No single strike, no one action, transforms the piece. It's the slow, deliberate accumulation of hundreds of gentle taps, subtle adjustments, and repeated polishing strokes. The tools may be simple, but the breathtaking outcome depends entirely on restraint, rhythm, and an unwavering focus. A faint breeze rustles the reed mats hanging overhead, and motes of dust drift lazily in the shafts of golden light. The furnace behind us has now cooled to a dull, sleepy red, awaiting its next call to action. For now, the day's focus has shifted from the raw power of flame to the delicate art of finesse. The gold under the hammer grows smoother, more defined. A border gleams softly, its dotted pattern now complete. What was once a rough casting now hints at an emerging elegance, and as I sit here in the quiet warmth of a Kushite afternoon, I realize that mastery often looks exactly like this: quiet hands, simple tools, and the immense patience to let small, precise movements accumulate into something beautiful, something that will outlast empires. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the ancient world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories from history. See you next time. The border now gleams with its neat row of tiny indentations, and the goldsmith pauses not because he's finished, but because the next step requires a different kind of attention. Shaping metal is one skill, infusing it with meaning is another. You sense the shift immediately. The air feels the same, the courtyard unchanged, yet the atmosphere grows subtly, more deliberate. He reaches for a small clay tablet resting near the wall. On it, faint lines sketch a design, a stylized ram's head framed by curling horns. The curves are elegant, symmetrical, unmistakably symbolic. The ram, closely associated with the god Amun, carried enormous religious weight in Kushite culture. Mainstream historians agree that Amun worship, inherited and adapted from ancient Egypt, became central in Kush, particularly during the Napatan and Meroitic periods. The god's imagery appears in temples, royal regalia, and, yes, jewelry crafted in workshops like this one. You watch as the goldsmith studies the sketch briefly, then turns back to the metal. No ruler, no compass, just memory and muscle precision. With a pointed engraving tool, he begins incising the outline directly onto the polished surface. The first line is faint, barely grazing the metal. He retraces it, deepening the groove. Slowly, the ram's curved horn emerges, spiraling inward like a desert breeze caught in motion. There's something hypnotic about watching lines appear where there was once only blank gold. You feel as if you're witnessing thought become tangible. Quirky tidbit. Some scholars have proposed that certain animal motifs in Kushite art may have carried layered meanings beyond their religious associations, possibly clan symbols or coded references to lineage. Evidence is limited, and interpretations vary, but it's fascinating to imagine jewelry doubling as subtle identity markers. Ancient business cards, perhaps, but far more stylish. The goldsmith shifts his grip, steadying his wrist against the stone slab. The ram's eye is added next to small almond-shaped indentation. A few careful taps deepen it, catching the light. You notice how each detail transforms the entire piece. The design isn't crowded, it breathes. Negative space is as intentional as the lines themselves. Historians still argue whether Kushite artisans followed standardized iconographic rules set by temple authorities or enjoyed greater creative freedom within workshops. Surviving pieces show both consistency and variation. It's possible that royal commissions demanded strict adherence to symbolic forms, while smaller, personal items allowed for more experimentation. Here in the courtyard, you suspect it's a blend of reverence and artistry. Another artisan nearby works on a different piece of broad bracelet segment featuring geometric patterns rather than divine imagery. Interlocking triangles march across its surface, precise and rhythmic. Geometry held significance too, perhaps reflecting order, balance, or simply aesthetic preference. You can't help thinking how modern design trends cycle endlessly. Somewhere, a contemporary jeweler might unknowingly echo these very patterns. The afternoon light shifts again, warming to amber. It catches the engraved lines, highlighting their depth. The goldsmith pauses to brush away fine shavings with a soft reed brush. Tiny curls of metal fall aside, collected carefully for even symbolism generates leftovers. He now reaches for a finer, tula-narrow punch designed to create raised dots around the ram's head. This technique adds texture and dimension, making the central figure stand out. Each dot is tapped individually. Tap, lift, tap, lift. It's painstaking work, the kind that rewards patience and punishes distraction. You instinctively hold still, as if your movement might ripple through time and disrupt the alignment. Mainstream archaeological finds from Kushite royal tombs show similar decorative techniques, engraving combined with granulation and repouts, where designs are hammered from the reverse to create raised relief. While this particular piece relies on engraving and surface detailing, you sense that more complex methods await in other corners of the workshop. Beyond the courtyard walls, life in Meru continues. Traders likely pass by wearing imported fabrics from the Mediterranean. Beads from sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps even glassware influenced by Hellenistic styles. The kingdom of Kush thrived at a crossroads of cultures, and that blending shows in its art. Greek, Egyptian, and indigenous African elements intertwine subtly. The Ram of Ammon might share space with lotus motifs or abstract designs that owe more to local tradition than foreign influence. Historians still argue whether Kushite's identity during the Meroitic period leaned more toward continuity with Egyptian heritage or toward a distinct, self-defined cultural expression. The truth likely shifts over time, evolving as political and economic circumstances changed. Empires, after all, are never static. They breathe, adapt, reinterpret. The goldsmith sets down the engraving tool and examines the piece from multiple angles, tilting it to catch the light. He isn't admiring it in vanity, he's checking balance. Symmetry matters. A horn too wide, an eye slightly misplaced these, would disrupt the harmony. You realize that this calm afternoon carries political weight. A bracelet bearing divine imagery reinforces belief systems, affirms royal ideology, and signals allegiance. Jewelry is portable, propaganda beautiful, subtle, effective. A light joke drifts through your mind. Imagine trying to explain to a Kushite artisan that, in the distant future, people will mass-produce jewelry in factories and sell it under fluorescent lighting. He would probably look at you the way you look at a crooked engraving mild concern, followed by a quiet correction. The final touches on the ram's head are complete. The engraved lines are crisp. The dotted border frames the design elegantly. The gold gleams warmly, reflecting the desert sun filtered through reed shade. And in this tranquil courtyard, you witness not just decoration, but intention belief hammered gently into metal. Symbolism carved with steady hands, a quiet fusion of faith and craftsmanship that will endure long after the afternoon fades. The ram's head now gleams at the center of the gold plate, serene and watchful, as if even the deity understands the value of a calm afternoon. The goldsmith studies it one last time, then nods subtle approval, the kind that doesn't need applause. Before you can sink fully into admiration, a shadow stretches across the courtyard entrance. A figure stands just beyond the reed shade, accompanied by a younger attendant. The visitor's linen garment is finely woven, edged with delicate embroidery. Gold beads glint at the neckline. You don't need an announcement to sense status. This is someone accustomed to being listened to. The goldsmith rises, bowing his head respectfully. The visitor steps inside, careful not to disturb the tools. You catch fragments of conversation-measured tones, polite but direct. A commission is being discussed. Mainstream historians confirm that elite patronage drove much of the luxury craft production in Kush, particularly during the Meroitic period. Royal women, often powerful figures in their own right, played prominent roles. The Kandeks, or queen mothers, were especially influential. In fact, classical sources like Strabo describe a Kushite queen often, identified as Amenerinez, who led forces against Rome in the late 1st century BCE. Imagine commissioning jewelry in the same city where queens negotiated with emperors. Casual power. Historians still argue whether the title Kandake referred strictly to queen mothers or functioned more broadly as a royal female title. The nuances of Kushite political structure remain partially obscured, but there's little doubt that royal women held extraordinary authority. The visitor gestures toward the partially completed piece. The goldsmith presents it on both palms, head bowed. The ram's head catches the light, its engraved lines sharp and dignified. The visitor examines it closely, tilting it slightly. A faint nod follows approval, but not indulgence. Standards are high when gold is plentiful. A soft exchange follows. More is requested. The attendant unrolls a small piece of linen, revealing a handful of polished carnelian beads, deep red runge stones, likely traded from regions to the north or east. Trade networks connected Kush to Egypt, the Mediterranean, and sub-Saharan Africa. Carnelian, glass beads, and even Mediterranean amphorae have been found in Meroitic contexts. This workshop may be calm, but the world flows through it. You notice the goldsmith's expression sharp and not anxious, just focused. The commission now expands. The engraved plate will form the central element of a necklace, flanked by gold wearwork and suspended beads. A piece fit for someone whose presence shifts the air. Quirky tidbit, some scholars speculate that certain royal jewelry pieces may have been worn not only in life, but specifically crafted for ceremonial appearances, amplifying divine associations in public rituals. Imagine attending a temple procession where the sunlight strikes a gold collar just so, reinforcing the wearer's sacred connection. Ancient stage lighting, courtesy of the sun, The visitor traces a finger just above the ram's horn, never touching, but indicating a desire for greater prominence. Perhaps the horns should curve more dramatically, perhaps additional granulation along the border. The goldsmith listens carefully, nodding. This is collaboration, not command. Elite patrons expected refinement. Historians still argue whether such commissions were documented in written contracts. Using the Meroitic script, or arranged entirely through oral agreements and established trust networks, given the partial decipherment of Meroitic writing, the administrative details remain somewhat mysterious. You imagine clay tablets tucked away somewhere, quietly waiting for modern scholars to fully unlock their secrets. The visitor's attendant produces a small leather pouch. It opens to reveal additional gold fragments payment in material form. No coin clinks into a palm. Instead, raw wealth changes hands, ready to be transformed. This reminds you that Kush did not rely heavily on coinage in the same way Rome did during this period. While some coins circulated through trade, gold itself functioned as both material and value. The goldsmith accepts the pouch with both hands. There is no visible excitement, only responsibility. Old and trusted is gold accounted for. A breeze stirs the reed mats again, and for a moment, sunlight spills more directly across the courtyard. You feel the subtle tension: expectation, reputation, legacy. The visitor offers a final nod and steps back toward the courtyard entrance. The attendant gathers the linen cloth, now lighter without its beads. Sand crunches softly under sandals, and just like that, the presence withdraws, leaving the workshop once more in quiet focus. You exhale without realizing you were holding your breath. The goldsmith turns back to the slab, weighing the plate in his hand. The commission has shifted the afternoon's trajectory. What began as a simple engraved piece now carries royal implication. Mainstream archaeological evidence shows that Haspatu's Kushite burials often contained elaborate gold necklaces combining central plaques, bead strands, and intricate wearwork. You likely witnessing the birth of something similar in object that might one day rest in a tomb beneath one of Meru's steep pyramids. The goldsmith calls softly to the apprentice. More charcoal will be needed. Finer wire must be drawn. Granulsteiny spheres of gold will have to be formed for delicate embellishment. The calm afternoon continues, but its purpose has sharpened. And as you settle back onto your stool, watching preparations begin anew, you understand that this isn't merely craft. It's diplomacy in metal. It's devotion shaped by hand. It's the quiet machinery of prestige turning smoothly under desert light. The tapping resumes measured, patient, unhurried, carrying the weight of a queen's expectations in every gentle strike. The courtyard returns to its steady rhythm. But there's a subtle quickening beneath the calm, now a sense of elevated purpose. The gold plate with its engraved ram's head rests at the center of the stone slab, waiting to become more than a solitary emblem. The commission calls for refinement, delicacy, something that whispers wealth instead of shouting it. The goldsmith reaches for the coil of fine wire you noticed earlier. It's thin, astonishingly thin, yet still strong enough to hold its shape. He rolls it gently between his fingers, checking its flexibility. This is where the afternoon turns intricate: granulation and filigree. Techniques so delicate that even modern jewelers occasionally stare at ancient pieces and mutter respectful compliments under their breath. Mainstream archaeological evidence confirms that Kushite artisans practiced advanced decorative methods, including filigree and soldering fine gold wires into lace-like patterns and granulation, the attachment of tiny gold spheres onto a surface to create texture and design. These techniques were also known in the Mediterranean world, particularly among Etruscan goldsmiths. Historians still argue whether Kushite granulation developed independently or was influenced by cross-cultural exchange through trade routes linking Africa and the Mediterranean. The debate remains open, but the craftsmanship speaks for itself. You lean closer as the goldsmith cuts a short length of wire and begins twisting it carefully, forming a tight spiral. The motion is precise, almost meditative, no wasted movement. The spiral grows evenly, each loop snug against the next. It's astonishing how such fragile material can form such confident shapes. Meanwhile, an apprentice prepares granules. He places tiny snippets of gold wire onto a shallow charcoal block and applies focused heat with a small blowpipe. The pieces shrink and round under flame, surface tension pulling them into near-perfect spheres. It feels like watching droplets of sunlight beat up on invisible glass. The granules are minuscule, some no larger than grains of sand. Quirky tidbit. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to replicate ancient granulation techniques and discovered just how tricky it is to fuse the granules without visible solder marks. Some ancient methods may have relied on copper salts or organic binders to facilitate bonding. The exact recipes remain partly speculative. It's possible Kushite goldsmiths guarded such techniques as closely as a modern chef protects a secret sauce. And honestly, fair enough. The goldsmith positions the twisted wire around the border of the engraved plate, shaping it into a frame that echoes the curvature of the ram's horns. He adjusts it, millimeter by millimeter though. Of course, no one here says millimeter, he simply nudges until it feels right. A paste perhaps, a mixture of clay and organic binders, applied sparingly to hold the wire in place. Now comes the delicate part. The plate, with its wire frame and carefully arranged granules, is placed onto a small clay support near the furnace. The heat must be sufficient to fuse the gold elements together, but not so intense that the entire design melts into an enthusiastic puddle. Precision is everything. You hold your breath as the apprentice directs gentle heat across the surface. The granules glow faintly, then brighter. For a tense moment, nothing seems to happen. Then, almost imperceptibly, the tiny spheres settle into the plate, bonding seamlessly. No obvious solder lines, just unity. Mainstream scholars marvel at ancient granulated jewelry precisely because of this seamlessness. Even under magnification, joins can be nearly invisible, whether through chemical fluxes, precise temperature control, or both. Kushite artisans achieved results that challenge modern replication attempts. The plate cools slowly. When lifted again, the transformation is subtle but profound. The twisted wireframe catches light differently, adding depth. The granules create texture, making the ram's head stand forward with quiet authority. It's no longer just engraved, it's dimensional. Historians still argue whether such intricate techniques were reserved exclusively for elite commissions or if skilled artisans occasionally produced similar pieces for affluent merchants and temple officials. The archaeological record suggests hierarchy in craftsmanship, but the lines blur in smaller finds. Perhaps excellence occasionally slipped beyond palace walls. The goldsmith inspects the work closely, tilting it toward the sun, filtering through reed shade. He runs a fingertip lightly across the surface, not to polish, but to feel for irregularities. Gold may be soft, but mistakes harden quickly in reputation. You glance toward the small pile of unused granules. Each one required careful heating, patient formation. Hundreds may be needed for a single necklace segment. The time investment is immense, and yet the atmosphere remains unhurried. There's no visible anxiety, no frantic correction, just steady progress. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. Somewhere in the distant future, someone will complain about waiting 2 days for a custom jewelry order. If only they could see this afternoon breath-powered soldering in granules, smaller than breadcrumbs. The furnace behind you dims again, its role complete for now. The piece rests in the goldsmith's hands, transformed from simple casting to intricate artistry. Filigree curls frame divine imagery. Granules sparkle like captured desert stars. Beyond the courtyard, Meru hums with life, trade routes stretching toward the Red Sea and deep into Africa. Ideas travel with goods, techniques evolve with contact. But here, in this shaded space, innovation feels timeless. You settle back, letting the rhythm of careful craftsmanship steady your breathing. The commission grows more elaborate, more luminous, yet the afternoon remains calm-proof that even the most intricate beauty can emerge from patience and measured heat. The necklace centerpiece now glows with quiet, complexity-engraved ram, filigree frame, tiny granules like frozen sparks. It rests on the stone slab as if aware of its own importance. Around you, the courtyard hums softly again, tools being rearranged, charcoal settling, apprentices moving with that practiced half-silence you've grown used to. But this piece, for all its local craftsmanship, is not purely local in spirit. As you sit there, watching the goldsmith adjust a final curl of wire, you begin to sense how far the afternoon truly stretches, not just across the courtyard, across continents. A shallow wooden tray is brought forward, and onto it the attendant's carnelian beads are placed again deep orange-red, polished smooth. Carnelian was prized across the ancient world, from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean. In Kush, Such beads likely arrived via trade routes, linking the Nile Valley to Egypt and beyond, possibly even through Red Sea ports connecting to Arabia and India. Mainstream historians recognize that by the Meroitic period, Kush was integrated into extensive trade networks. Goods flowed north to Roman Egypt and south into sub-Saharan Africa, east toward the Red Sea, and west into the savannas. You pick up one bead mentally, of course. Best not disrupt time and imagine its journey. Perhaps it was mined in distant lands, shaped by other hands, carried across deserts on camelback caravans. Yes, camels were increasingly used in desert trade during this era, though their widespread adoption in the region accelerated later. Historians still argue about the precise timing and scale of camel-based trade expansion in Kushite territories, but evidence suggests growing reliance on desert caravans, connecting inland Africa to coastal ports. The goldsmith examines the beads carefully, holding them up against the necklace centerpiece to assess color harmony. The warm red complements the gold beautifully, intensifying its glow. He nods faintly. Good choice. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have discovered Mediterranean amphory fragments at Meru containers that once held wine or olive oil. Imagine sipping imported wine beneath these same acacia trees while wearing locally crafted gold. Ancient globalization had its perks. A second artisan begins preparing small gold caps that will frame each bead. Using thin sheet gold, he cuts tiny circular shapes and gently domes them with a rounded punch. The process is delicate but efficient. Each cap will hug the bead's opening, adding both security and visual cohesion. It's a reminder that design isn't just about grandeur, it's about transitions, how one element meets another. Outside the courtyard, a trader's voice rises briefly, speaking a language you don't quite recognize. Meru was linguistically layered. Meroitic dominated official inscriptions, but Egyptian, Greek, and other tongues likely drifted through markets. Trade brings polyglot afternoons. You imagine negotiations happening a few streets away: ivory for grain, iron tools for textiles, gold dust for imported ceramics. Mainstream historical fact. During the late 1st century BCE and early 1st century CE, Kush engaged in both conflict and diplomacy with Rome after Roman forces annexed Egypt. A peace treaty reportedly established favorable trade conditions between the two powers. Gold likely played a quiet role in these negotiations. Wealth talks, even when swords briefly interrupt. Historians still argue about the exact economic weight of Kushite gold exports compared to iron production. Mero's massive iron slag heaps suggest industrial-scale metallurgy, possibly earning it the nickname Birmingham of Africa among modern scholars. Whether gold or iron-dominated revenue streams remains debated, but in this courtyard, gold clearly commands attention. The goldsmith begins threading the carnelian beads onto a temporary fiber cord to determine spacing. He alternates bead and gold cap, adjusting symmetry with a critical eye. The central plaque will anchor the arrangement, suspended from a carefully constructed loop of thicker wire. You realize how much geometry underpins beauty balance, repetition, measured spacing. A breeze stirs again, carrying faint hints of river moisture. The Nile, ever present, ensures that even in desert heat, life gathers densely along its banks. Boats likely glide downstream at this very moment, loaded with grain, livestock, perhaps even finished jewelry bound for distant elites. You find yourself imagining the necklace's eventual wearer stepping into sunlight during a temple procession. The gold catching rays, the carnelian glowing like embers, onlookers murmuring approval. Jewelry becomes spectacle. Spectacle reinforces status, and status shapes politics, all from a calm afternoon's labor. The goldsmith pauses and glances toward the horizon visible between courtyard walls. For a brief second, you wonder what he thinks about distant lands he'll never see but whose materials pass through his hands. Does he imagine Rome, Alexandria, the Red Sea ports? Or is the world simply measured in caravans and river currents? A light joke surfaces. If ancient artisans had travel brochures, they'd probably advertise Visit Meru, fine gold, excellent iron, pyramid views. Modest tagline, strong offerings. The beads are now arranged in a balanced sequence. The central plaque is fitted with small loops on either side, carefully soldered earlier using controlled heat. These loops will anchor the strand securely. Each connection is tested gently. No weak links permitted in royal commissions. Historians still argue whether Kushite workshops were organized into guild-like structures or operated more informally under household systems. The level of coordination and skill suggests structured apprenticeship traditions, though documentary evidence is limited. Watching this team move in synchronized rhythm, you lean toward organized mastery. The afternoon light deepens further, painting everything in amber. The necklace begins to resemble a finished vision rather than scattered components. Gold and stone, local and foreign, divine symbol and traded bedal, converging seamlessly, and you sit quietly in the shade, aware that this small courtyard is less isolated than it appears. It is a node in a vast web stretching across deserts and seas, a calm center in a dynamic world. The threading continues, steady and precise. As trade winds metaphorical and literal seem to drift gently through the open doorway of the workshop, the necklace now begins to take definite shape, a blend of engraved gold, filigree spirals, granules, and carefully spaced carnelian beads. You watch, fascinated, as the goldsmith adjusts a single bead, nudging it imperceptibly along the temporary fiber cord. Balance is everything. Too close, and the piece feels cramped. Too far, and it looks sparse. Each millimeter matters. Well, maybe not literally millimeters, but close enough that your modern sensibilities would approve. Nearby, the apprentice sorts remaining gold granules into tiny bowls, each organized by size. He occasionally glances at the central plaque, comparing the scale of the granules to the ram's head. The subtlety is almost hypnotic. You begin to notice the rhythm of the workshop more clearly. Hammer taps, soft metallic chimes from adjusting wire, the steady exhale of the blowpipe, even the faint rustle of sand on the stone slab. Each sound is deliberate, contributing to the auditory tapestry of creation. Mainstream archaeological evidence shows that Kushite artisans valued proportionality highly. Beads, filigree, granules, and central plaques were arranged to achieve visual harmony. Symmetry wasn't just aesthetic, it conveyed order, cosmic balance, and divine favor. Jewelry functioned as a statement of both earthly and spiritual alignment. Quirky tidbit, some scholars speculate that certain Kushite necklace designs mimic the pattern of the Nile itself, curves echoing river bends, punctuated by dots resembling cataracts or islands. While this idea is debated, imagining gold as a reflection of the river is charming, and perhaps not too far-fetched for a culture deeply entwined with the Nile's rhythm. The goldsmith carefully threads the first strand of the finer wire through the central plaque's loops. The metal flexes just enough to pass without bending permanently. He adjusts it, tucking the ends neatly under the wire frame. You notice his fingers move almost independently, each performing a task with silent confidence. Apprentices often shadowed master artisans for years, learning subtle hand motions that no amount of verbal instruction could convey. Historians still argue whether such skills were formally codified or transferred purely through observation and repetition. The first carnelian bead slides into place. Its deep red-orange hue contrasts perfectly with the soft yellow glow of gold. You can almost feel the way it will catch light when worn, flashes in motion reflecting sun or torchlight. Attention to these tiny interactions between light and material was an essential aspect of jewelry design. The ancients understood optics intuitively, even if they didn't describe it scientifically. The goldsmith reaches for a small hammer and lightly taps the central plaque, ensuring a snug fit for the wire. Tap, tap, tap. Each motion is careful. Too hard and the piece could warp. Too soft and the fit is loose. You think about modern jewelry making machines that automate these adjustments in seconds, and it feels almost magical to witness human patience achieving precision. Another artisan begins shaping the remaining granules to create small, decorative clusters between the beads. Tiny spheres of gold are picked up with a pointed tool and gently pressed into place. Each cluster is symmetrical, yet not rigidly identical. A human touch is apparent. You realize the subtle irregularities give the piece character breathing life into an object that could otherwise feel mechanical. Mainstream studies of Kushite jewelry suggest that the combination of filigree, granulation, and beadwork wasn't purely aesthetic. Pieces conveyed status, lineage, and spiritual power. Wearing such a necklace signaled access to wealth, religious favor, and trade networks spanning the Nile Valley, the Red Sea, and beyond. A faint laugh escapes you when you imagine a Kushite artisan attempting to explain viral TikTok trends to the queen commissioning this necklace. She would probably tilt her head, amused, and say, "We'll stick to gold, thank you." Indeed, gold doesn't need likes or shares. It asserts its presence effortlessly. The wire framework is secured, beads evenly spaced, granules in clusters around the central motif. The central ram's head remains the focal point, and yet everything around it enhances its prominence. It's not just decoration, it's storytelling. Symbols, materials, and design choices narrate status, faith, and craftsmanship simultaneously. Historians still debate how much individual creative freedom Kushite artisans had when fulfilling elite commissions. Did queens dictate every detail, or did masters subtly negotiate design choices through craft? Evidence points to a mix of respect for authority and professional discretion. In this courtyard, the negotiation is nonverbal, expressed through micro-adjustments, gentle nudges, and silent assessment of proportions. Finally, the apprentice wipes the stone slab clean, removing residual dust, stray granules, and tiny shavings. The goldsmith inspects the entire assembly from multiple angles, turning it slowly. Light catches differently on each element: the hammered gold, the engraved plaque, the filigree spirals, and the deep carnelian beads. Every adjustment has contributed to a unified composition, and in this calm, shaded courtyard, with the distant sounds of Moreau's bustling streets just beyond. The necklace begins to look less like a collection of materials and more like a finished creation. It's still a work in progress, yes, but you can almost imagine its eventual place on a queen, glinting in sunlight or temple torchlight, signaling status, devotion, and artistry in one subtle, enduring statement. With the main strand assembled and the central plaque securely in place, the goldsmith leans back slightly, surveying the work. You notice how his eyes flick over every junction, the wire loops, the granule clusters, the spacing of carnelian beads, almost as if measuring the aura of the piece rather than its physical dimensions. There's a quiet pride here, but no rush. The courtyard's rhythm is calm, deliberate, almost hypnotic. Nearby, an apprentice prepares the secondary elements. Tiny gold loops, meant to connect additional strands or pendants, are sorted by size. Each is curved gently, with a small pair of pliers fashioned from bronze. The loops are unassuming, yet essential. A weak loop can compromise the structural integrity of the entire necklace. You realize that the beauty of the piece depends as much on hidden support as on visible decoration, a lesson that seems both literal and metaphorical. Mainstream archaeological evidence from eroic sites confirms that multi-strand necklaces were common among Kushite elites. These often included central plaques, filigree frames, granulated embellishments, and dangling pendants or beads. They weren't just ornamental. They signaled wealth, influence, and access to far-reaching trade networks. The interplay of materials, design, and technique reinforced social hierarchy. The goldsmith selects a fine pointed awl and begins marking positions for the secondary loops. Along the back of the central plaque, precision is crucial. If the loops are misaligned, the necklace will hang awkwardly. He works slowly, a faint frown of concentration etched across his forehead. Tap, lift, tap. The sound is soft, almost a whisper against the stone slab. Quirky tidbit. Some scholars have suggested that the placement of loops and pendants may have been symbolic, corresponding to stars or celestial events, though concrete evidence remains limited. Whether intended as practical connectors or cosmic markers, you appreciate the possibility of both a blend of function and subtle storytelling. Historians still argue whether Kushite jewelry was designed primarily for personal display, ceremonial use, or as a portable assertion of political power. Surviving artifacts suggest overlap. Objects could be worn daily by elites, yet serve spiritual or symbolic purposes during rituals. In this courtyard, practicality and devotion coexist seamlessly. The first loop is attached. A small granule is pressed at its base to secure the joint. You notice how even tiny details are repeated systematically. The goldsmith and apprentice seem to share an unspoken rhythm, a choreography developed over countless afternoons. Coordination and trust make precision possible. Next comes a short length of secondary wire to hold dangling carnelian beads. The goldsmith threads it through the new loops, adjusting tension and spacing. Each bead must swing freely, but remain in harmony with the central plaque. Too loose, and the strand looks sloppy. Too tight, and movement is restricted. Gold, you realize, has personality. It responds to touch, temperature, and pressure, demanding respect at every step. The apprentice prepares additional granules. Some will accent the central loops, others will decorate secondary strands. Each sphere is heated briefly, forming perfect beads through surface tension. The precision is remarkable, especially given the tools and resources available. Historians still argue whether Kushite workshops developed standardized granulation methods or relied on artisanal improvisation. Judging by the results, both mastery and creativity were essential. As the sun shifts, light passes through a small gap in the reed shade, casting a golden shaft across the necklace. You notice how the filigree curls catch the light differently from the granules. The engraved ram's head glows subtly. Carnelian beads reflect sunlight in warm flashes. It's almost theatrical, though performed entirely without intention of drama-just, careful observation and placement. Ancient artisans clearly understood the interplay of light and material. The goldsmith steps back and examines the necklace from multiple angles. You can see why Kushite pieces impress even modern jewelers. Attention to scale, symmetry, and light interplay makes the object more than the sum of its parts. It's a harmonious system, carefully balanced yet dynamic, reflecting cultural sophistication that extended beyond simple adornment. A faint joke pops into your mind. If someone from a distant land saw this necklace for the first time, they might think it was a divine artifact instead of a well-made ornament. And perhaps, in a sense, that's exactly what it was intended to be, a tangible connection between humans, status, and the divine. The first secondary strand of beads and granules is complete. The goldsmith gently tests the tension, adjusting loops and knots as needed. Every small correction reinforces stability. Even slight misalignments can compromise both appearance and wearability. Mainstream studies of Kushite necklaces suggest that multiple strands were often added incrementally, allowing artisans to adjust design complexity as patron expectations evolved. This courtyard scene embodies that process. Deliberate addition, each layer building on the last. Finally, the secondary elements are aligned, ready for attachment to the central plaque. The courtyard feels quieter now, not from absence of work, but because the rhythm has settled into a steady, comfortable cadence. Gold hammers, wire twists, granule placement, bead threading, they all merge into a symphony of patience. You realize, as you watch the artisans coordinate, that this necklace represents more than wealth or taste. It is an archive of skill, trade, culture, and devotion, all crystallized into a small, wearable object. The calm afternoon stretches onward, punctuated only by soft taps and careful adjustments. A quiet testament to human diligence and artistry. The central plaque now anchors its first secondary strand of beads and granules, each element carefully tensioned and aligned. You notice how the goldsmith leans in, inspecting from multiple angles, tilting the piece toward the afternoon sun that filters through the reed mats. Shadows play delicately across the engraved ram's head, accentuating its spiraling horns and the subtly raised granules. It's mesmerizing, a small universe captured in gold. Yet the workshop hums along as if nothing remarkable is occurring. That's the paradox. Extraordinary craftsmanship performed in everyday rhythm. Nearby, an apprentice holds a thin strip of gold sheet, cut to serve as a decorative backplate for additional strands. He passes it to the goldsmith, who flexes it gently, testing malleability. Gold's unique combination of softness and resilience makes it ideal for these layered assemblies. Tap, adjust, bend. Precision is constant, but the motion is almost meditative, like a slow river shaping stones over time. You notice the simplicity of tools, small hammers, awls, burnishing stones, nothing mechanized, yet output rivals modern standards. Mainstream archaeological evidence confirms that Kushite jewelry frequently employed backing plates and layered construction. These techniques allowed heavier necklaces to distribute weight evenly, making them wearable despite intricate designs and multiple dangling elements. Comfort mattered, even in ceremonial or elite contexts. Historians still debate whether ergonomics were an intentional priority or an emergent property of repeated use. Either way, surviving pieces suggest remarkable attention to wearability. The goldsmith now takes up a tiny awl and begins marking positions for additional granules along the secondary strand. Tap, tap, lift. Each placement is intentional, reinforcing visual symmetry while creating subtle texture. You lean closer, almost entranced by the precision. There's a quiet satisfaction in watching something so small emerge with exacting detail. The apprentice hovers nearby, ready to pass granules or hold pieces steady as instructed. This is mentorship in action. Observation, repetition, silent guidance. Decades of cumulative knowledge unfold in each gesture. Quirky tidbit. Experimental archaeologists have found that Kushite artisans sometimes recycled tiny gold shavings from previous work, melting them into fresh granules. No scrap, wasted practicality mixed with finesse. You imagine these golden whispers of previous afternoons reincarnating into new jewelry. It's sustainability in a very ancient sense. The sun shifts and light falls across the courtyard at a different angle. Highlights sparkle from polished beads, catch along engraved lines, and glint from gold spirals. The combination of textures matte, polished, faceted, creates subtle visual interplay. Ancient artisans clearly understood how light interacted with material, even if they lacked a formal optical theory. A single gesture could catch sunlight just right, emphasizing the central plaque's ram motif. The apprentice carefully holds a granule, heating it slightly over a small charcoal ember before positioning it on the secondary strand. The goldsmith applies slight pressure with a burnishing tool to secure it. This combination of heat and mechanical bonding is delicate. Too much, and the granule flattens. Too little, and it doesn't adhere. Tap, adjust, repeat, minute by minute, element by element. The necklace grows more complete. Patience dictates pace. Haste risks ruin. Mainstream finds indicate that granulation and filigree were sometimes combined in complex arrangements to symbolize hierarchies or cosmological ideas. Tiny spheres could represent stars, sun disks, or other sacred motifs. Integrated with geometric or animal symbolism, historians still debate the intended meanings of many motifs: practical, aesthetic, symbolic, or all three, but the visual language is unmistakable. Watching it develop now, you feel the narrative unfolding under your eyes. The goldsmith reaches for additional carnelian beads. These are larger than those threaded first, meant to anchor pendants and emphasize visual rhythm. He alternates bead, gold cap, and granule cluster with practiced ease. No rulers, no measuring devices. Yet the outcome is perfectly proportional, demonstrating innate understanding of balance and composition. Outside, distant Meru hums with life. Traders' voices drift faintly through the courtyard walls. The Nile, just beyond sight, glints in patches of sunlight. Trade, faith, craft all converge quietly here. In this shaded space, the necklace becomes more than adornment. It embodies connectivity, movement, and cultural memory. Finally, the secondary strand is complete. Every bead, every granule, every small gold accent is secured and aligned. You exhale alongside the goldsmith, sensing accomplishment in the courtyard's calm air. Yet the work is not finished. Additional strands, pendants, and connections await. Even in calm, the afternoon holds more layers. Every detail builds on the last like careful sedimentation in a river, forming beauty incrementally, deliberately, patiently. And you realize, in Kushite workshops, afternoons weren't merely hours of labor. They were cumulative rituals of mastery where material, intention, and skill intersected to produce objects that would outlive the hands that shaped them. The secondary strand now sits in perfect alignment, each tiny bead and granule occupying its precise position. The central plaque anchors the necklace like a miniature sun at the heart of a carefully balanced cosmos. The goldsmith tilts the piece again and again, catching sunlight at multiple angles to ensure perfect harmony. The engraved ram's head glows subtly, almost as if it knows the ceremonial attention it will one day command. The courtyard is calm, but there's a palpable sense of anticipation, an awareness that this magnificent piece is nearing completion. Nearby, the apprentice carefully prepares a set of tiny gold loops for the next phase. Each one is formed with a small bronze mandrel bent into a near-perfect circle. These loops will connect additional strands or pendants, ensuring both structural integrity and aesthetic balance. You can see that even these minute elements are approached with the same level of care as the central plaque. It is easy to forget just how many tiny components are necessary to transform a flat-cast piece into breathtaking, wearable artistry. Mainstream archaeology confirms that this kind of multi-strand and modular construction was very common in Kushite jewelry. The use of layers, loops, and pendants allowed artisans to create incredibly complex designs without compromising flexibility or comfort. This innovation not only enhanced the visual effect, but also allowed for easier repair or adjustment of practical consideration that really speaks to the long-term use and value of these pieces. Historians still debate whether this modular design was originally intended to facilitate repair, symbolize social hierarchy, or simply enhance the decorative impact. But looking at surviving examples, you can see the deliberate planning and genius behind them. The goldsmith now selects a fine awl and begins marking positions for the new loops along the back of the secondary. Strand, tap, tap, lift. Each tiny indent signals the precise spot where a loop will be attached. As I lean closer, I'm almost hypnotized by the rhythm, noticing how subtly the goldsmith shifts pressure to account for variations in the metal's thickness and curvature. Just one small misalignment could ripple through the entire necklace, destroying its symmetry. Every single movement is calculated, yet executed with such fluid, effortless ease. Here, as a quirky little tidbit for you. Some experimental reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans may have used plant-based adhesives or even clay pastes to temporarily secure these tiny loops or granules before heating. This would have reduced the risk of misplacement during the delicate soldering process. Imagine that a mixture of ancient chemistry and intuitive craft, held together with patience and wisdom rather than formal formulas. The first loop is attached. The apprentice assists by holding the strand steady, while the goldsmith applies gentle, focused heat, ensuring the loop fuses without distorting the surrounding work. Tap, adjust, release. The loop is secure. Small granules are then applied to reinforce both the decoration and the stability of the join. Each granule is a micro-effort, a tiny testament to patience, but collectively, they form a visual rhythm that echoes the design of the central plaque. Mainstream archaeological finds show that granulation was often used to emphasize key design elements, drawing the eye to focal points or edges. In Kushite necklaces, this technique served both aesthetic and symbolic purposes, reinforcing concepts of hierarchy and divine imagery. Historians still debate whether the arrangement of these granules followed strict cultural conventions or varied according to the individual artisan's discretion. But watching the goldsmith here, I get the sense it's a blend of both. Tradition guided his choices, but his personal judgment and artistic eye directed the final details. The sun has shifted further across the sky, casting a warmer golden light into the courtyard. Highlights now sparkle along the delicate filigree curls and engraved lines. Reflecting subtly off the polished carnelian beads, I'm realizing just how critical light is to the aesthetic experience of this jewelry. Ancient artisans understood this intuitively, timing their work to the day as illumination and manipulating angles to maximize the visual impact and brilliance of their creations. The goldsmith continues, attaching loops and preparing the next set of pendants. Each new element designed to harmonize perfectly with the existing structure. His workspace is a model of meticulous organization. Small bowls hold granules. Neatly coiled wires sit beside tiny gold sheets. The charcoal embers are contained in shallow trays, ensuring consistent heat for soldering these incredibly delicate parts. Everything is optimized for both efficiency and precision, demonstrating a level of sophisticated workshop management that is truly impressive. A faint breeze drifts through the reed mats, lifting dust motes that look like tiny golden sparks in the afternoon light. The sound of metal tapping, soft exhalations, and gentle adjustments forms a meditative rhythm. I find myself unconsciously syncing my breathing to this cadence, feeling the deep calm of the workshop infuse my own senses. Even the smallest gestures, a careful adjustment of a single granule, a subtle twist of a wire are imbued with profound significance. The secondary strand is nearly complete. The tiny loops, granules, and pendants are all in place, aligned with meticulous attention to spacing and symmetry. The goldsmith pauses, tilting the piece and running a fingertip lightly along each junction, checking for tactile and visual consistency. I realize that this is no longer just a collection of materials. It has become a unified work of art, a tangible narrative of craft, trade, and cultural expression. Historians still argue whether Kushite artisans viewed their jewelry as purely functional, purely symbolic, or a blend of both. But the evidence suggests that while utility certainly mattered, aesthetic sophistication and ritual significance were inseparable from the design. Here in this courtyard, I'm witnessing that philosophy in motion. Every single bead, granule, and loop contributes to a coherent whole that perfectly balances practicality, beauty, and profound meaning. As the afternoon sun deepens into a rich, warm glow, I lean back and just watch. The necklace is poised right on the edge, somewhere between completion and utter perfection. The calm persists, punctuated only by those soft taps and occasional whispered directions. Here, in this sun-dappled workshop, centuries of tradition and accumulated knowledge are converging into one extraordinary, luminous creation. It's a powerful reminder of the timeless human drive to create beauty that endures. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey back in time. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the ancient world. See you next time. With the secondary strand now secured, the goldsmith shifts his attention to the final decorative elemansti pendants and accent beads that will dangle delicately from the loops. Each is designed to enhance movement and light reflection, ensuring that the necklace will not only dazzle visually, but also capture the subtle rhythm of motion when worn. You notice how he carefully selects each bead in granule, comparing size, shape, and color against the central plaque. This attention to harmony is remarkable. Nothing is left to chance. Nearby, the apprentice prepares miniature gold charms. Some are simple discs, others are minute replicas of symbols, miniature ankhs, crescent motifs, or abstract spirals. Using a pointed tool, he shapes each carefully, ensuring that they will hang evenly and not disrupt balance. It's painstaking work, the kind that demands patience and focus over long stretches of time. Yet the atmosphere remains calm, almost meditative. You find yourself inhaling alongside the rhythm of the workshop, feeling the slow, deliberate pulse of creation. Mainstream archaeological evidence confirms that Kushite necklaces often included multiple layers of pendants and charms, adding both aesthetic complexity and symbolic meaning. These additions emphasized status, religious affiliation, or family lineage. Historians still argue whether certain motifs were strictly standardized across elite pieces or allowed artisan discretion. But the surviving examples reveal a sophisticated visual language. Watching this courtyard, you sense both adherence to tradition and room for personal expression. The goldsmith begins attaching the first pendant. He threads it through the smallest gold loop, then uses a gentle tap with a rounded hammer to secure it without deforming the surrounding metal. Tap adjust, the pendant sways slightly, perfectly balanced against its neighbors. You realize that movement is an essential component. The dance of gold and beads enhances visibility, catching sunlight, torchlight, or the glimmer of ceremonial fires. Ancient artisans were early masters of kinetic ornamentation. Quirky tidbit: some archaeologists suggest that pendants might have functioned as miniature amulets, carrying protective or symbolic power. Even when worn as decoration, each piece could have served a subtle spiritual function. Much like the modern practice of wearing charms for luck or remembrance, the apprentice passes another charm, and the goldsmith positions it along the next loop. Precision is paramount. A tiny misalignment could make the entire piece seem asymmetrical, yet the process seems almost instinctive. Years of training, centuries of inherited technique guide each movement. Historians still debate the exact teaching methods of Kushite workshops whether knowledge was codified in written forms using the partially deciphered Meroitic script or passed entirely through oral tradition and observation. Either way, mastery is evident in every gesture. The central plaque gleams softly as pendants and granules frame it. Filigree curls catch the shifting light, reflecting it onto nearby surfaces. Carnelian beads glint between clusters of gold, their warm red-orange tones complementing the yellow glow. The visual effect is subtle but captivating, a delicate interplay of color, texture, and movement. You notice the goldsmith periodically adjusting pendants by millimeters, nudging loops or beads until the strand's balance is perfect. There's no hurrying, no impatience, only careful calibration. It's almost hypnotic to watch the accumulation of small, precise actions transform a flat-cast piece of gold into a dynamic, luminous object. Even the tiniest granule now contributes to the necklace's overall rhythm. Mainstream findings indicate that Meroitic necklaces often featured layers of pendants and strands designed for both visibility and sound. The soft clink of beads and charms, as the wearer moved, was intentional. creating a subtle auditory presence alongside the visual display. Historians still argue whether sound was primarily ceremonial, decorative, or incidental, but in the courtyard, you can almost hear the imagined clinking in anticipation. The apprentice carefully heats the last few granules and affixes them to the newly added pendants, adding subtle accents without overpowering the central motif. Tap, lift, tap. The courtyard hums with these quiet, purposeful sounds. Gold's malleability allows for small corrections, and each adjustment enhances structural integrity and aesthetic appeal simultaneously. Finally, the last pendant is attached. The necklace now hangs as a unified whole: central plaque, secondary strand, multiple pendants, granules, and beads, all balanced in perfect harmony. The courtyard seems to exhale with the artisans, as though acknowledging the piece's completion while the afternoon light bathes it in a golden glow. You realize that this calm, meticulous work has transformed raw materials into something much more than the sum of its parts, an emblem of status, skill, trade, and culture, all crystallized into one wearable masterpiece. With the pendants now in place, the goldsmith sets the necklace aside for a careful inspection. He tilts it, letting sunlight dance across the engraved ram, the filigree curls, and the clusters of granules. The interplay of light and shadow emphasizes depth, texture, and symmetry. You notice how even the smallest detila, single granule, slightly off-center would disrupt the visual narrative. It's astonishing that hundreds of such tiny adjustments have accumulated to create a coherent whole. The calm courtyard feels almost reverent, as if acknowledging the artistry before it. Nearby, the apprentice begins preparing a clasp mechanism, a simple but effective device to allow the necklace to be worn securely. In Kushite workshops, clasps were often straightforward loops or hooks, sometimes reinforced with extra granules or tiny filigree panels to disguise their utilitarian function. You can't help but admire how elegance and practicality are seamlessly blended here. Mainstream archaeological evidence confirms that Kushite jewelry frequently incorporated these clever fastening methods, ensuring both durability and ease of wear. Historians still debate whether more elaborate clasps were reserved for royalty or adopted by wealthy merchants as status symbols, but the craftsmanship in both contexts is impressive. The goldsmith selects a small wire and begins shaping it into the hook portion of the clasp, tap, twist, adjust. Each motion is deliberate, guided by experience rather than measurement. The apprentice holds a loop steady, ensuring alignment with the secondary strand. Tiny sparks of gold dust catch in the sunlight, adding a final, almost magical shimmer to the work. You imagine the clasp, simple yet functional, quietly bearing the weight of the necklace without drawing attention to itself, hidden hero of craftsmanship. Quirky tidbit: experimental reconstructions suggest that some Kushite artisans may have used organic resins or plant-based adhesives to temporarily stabilize clasps during assembly. This practice minimized risk of misalignment before permanent bonding through heating. You picture a master artisan carefully applying a drop of natural glue, a fleeting yet crucial act in the creation of perfection. Once the clasp is fitted, the goldsmith gently tests the necklace by holding it up and letting it hang. Gravity reveals any tension issues, slight twists, or asymmetries. Tap, adjust, tap, lift. Each minor correction is executed with patience and precision. You start to appreciate how much time and skill went into what might, at first glance, seem like a single, elegant object. Every element, the central plaque, the secondary strands, the granules, beads, pendants, and clasp carries the imprint of deliberate choices, accumulated experience, and cultural understanding. Mainstream studies indicate that Kushite jewelry was worn not only for daily display, but also during religious ceremonies, trade negotiations, and royal processions. Every adjustment would influence how the piece caught light, reflected color, and signaled status. Historians still debate the degree to which these adornments communicated political allegiance versus personal taste. In the calm courtyard, you sense both dimensions intertwining seamlessly: art, devotion, and diplomacy, all encoded in gold and stone. The goldsmith runs a fingertip along the necklace one final time, checking the smoothness of each curve, the alignment of every bead, and the subtle spacing between pendants. You notice a tiny glimmer in his eyes, quiet satisfaction, unspoken yet palpable. The apprentice mirrors this calm energy, having absorbed the rhythm of the work and now understanding the nuanced decision-making required at this stage. A faint breeze stirs, lifting motes of dust that shimmer briefly in the filtered light. You feel the slow pulse of the afternoon, the gentle rhythm of work, and the quiet accumulation of mastery over hours. It's hypnotic and meditative, a moment suspended between effort and completion. Even the courtyard walls seem to lean in, reflecting a warm glow from the gold surfaces. The central plaque's engraved ram is framed perfectly. Filigree curls highlight the craftsmanship. Granules punctuate key points. Carnelian beads add color and depth, and pendants sway slightly with motion. The clasp completes the design, balancing function with subtle elegance. The necklace now embodies both artistry and utility, symbolism and practicality, local tradition and international influence. Historians still argue whether Kushite artisans viewed each piece as primarily an artistic endeavor, a symbol of divine favor, or a demonstration of political and social status. From your vantage point, it is all of these things simultaneously a tangible narrative of culture, skill, and human intention, quietly coming together in a sunlit courtyard on a calm afternoon. The necklace now hangs complete, a delicate balance of central plaque, secondary strand, granules, beads, pendants, and clasp. You lean back slightly, letting your eyes wander over the finished piece. Each element contributes to a quiet symphony of craftsmanship, the engraved ram's head commanding attention. Filigree spirals guiding the eye outward, granules catching sunlight like frozen droplets, and carnelian beads glowing softly with warm, earthy tones. Even the tiny pendants swing slightly in the gentle breeze, bringing motion and subtle life to the work. The calm of the courtyard seems to settle further, almost in awe of what patience and skill have produced. Nearby, the goldsmith begins preparing the final polishing touches. Using a smooth, slightly oiled cloth, he gently buffs each element, bringing out the luster without disturbing delicate filigree or granulation. Buffing is slow, almost ritualistic, as if the gold itself demands respect before it is ready to be worn. You notice how light plays differently now. Reflections shift across the engraved plaque, glint off granules, and refract through the translucent carnelian beads. The effect is hypnotic, almost magical. Polishing isn't merely cosmetic, it enhances the necklace's ability to communicate status, devotion, and artistry in subtle visual language. Mainstream archaeological studies show that Kushite jewelry often underwent careful final finishing, including burnishing and polishing, to ensure the highest visual impact. Smooth surfaces enhanced light reflection, while polished granules provided depth and contrast. Historians still debate whether polishing techniques varied regionally within the kingdom or followed standardized methods passed down through workshops. Observing the courtyard now, you sense the consistency of skill suggests a well-developed tradition, yet individual artisans clearly exercise judgment in subtle details. The apprentice carefully passes additional soft cloths and small brushes, assisting without interrupting the workflow. Even minor distractions could disrupt the delicate process, and centuries of workshop etiquette ensure that movement is minimal and deliberate. You start to appreciate the apprenticeship system. Mastery isn't taught in words alone, but absorbed through rhythm, observation, and repetition. Historians still argue about the formal structure of Meroitic workshops, whether they were organized hierarchically, like guilds, or functioned more fluidly, but the outcomes speak to sustained, systematic knowledge transfer. Quirky tidbit: some reconstructions of Meroitic workshops suggest that artisans may have occasionally used fine river sand or powdered stone as a gentle abrasive during polishing. This would subtly enhance brightness and smoothness without risking structural damage. You imagine these tiny grains working invisibly, transforming raw surfaces into luminous reflections of skill. The goldsmith pauses, holds the necklace at eye level, and tilts it in multiple directions. Each angle reveals something different: a shadow that emphasizes depth here, a glint of carnelian there. Every adjustment communicates a story's status, devotion, and cultural sophistication intertwined in a single object. The courtyard feels silent, almost reverent, as though time itself has slowed to accommodate this final inspection. You notice how the central ram seems alive under shifting light. Its spiraled horns create miniature patterns of shadow, and the granules around it sparkle in complex rhythms. Tiny pendants sway gently, their motion echoing subtle environmental cues: a breeze, the movement of nearby reeds, even the quiet shift of sunlight. its artistry informed by nature, integrating external rhythm into the static structure of the piece. Mainstream evidence indicates that Kushite jewelry was often displayed during ceremonial occasions where sunlight, torchlight, or reflective surfaces enhanced visual impact. Light was part of the narrative. Historians still debate whether artisans planned these interactions deliberately or relied on accumulated experience. But it is clear that aesthetic awareness was deeply embedded in workshop practice. The apprentice applies a final touch of burnishing to one of the secondary loops. Tap, lift, tap, subtle. Friction aligns the metal and restores brilliance without altering shape. The goldsmith nods in approval. The necklace is complete. You feel a sense of quiet, not just at the beauty, but at the calm diligence, patience, and accumulated knowledge that produced it. Even in an ordinary afternoon courtyard, extraordinary skill manifests effortlessly. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. Centuries from now, someone might open a museum case and think this is divine craftsmanship handed directly from the gods, rather than the careful product of a sunlit workshop and patient hands. But perhaps, in a way, both are true. The divine resides in deliberate human effort. With the necklace now complete, the goldsmith carefully lifts it from the stone slab, holding it in both hands as though it were a living thing. The weight is solid yet supple, perfectly balanced. The central ram's head remains the focal point, its engraved spirals catching shifting beams of sunlight, while the filigree frame clusters of granules, and dangling pendants harmonize in a quiet symphony. You can almost hear the gentle movement as each pendant swings with imperceptible rhythm, ready to reflect torchlight or sunlight in its eventual display. The courtyard hums around you, but here, in this shaded space, there is a profound stillness, a sense of accomplishment that transcends mere labor. Nearby, the apprentice sets aside the tools and small bowls of remaining granules and beads. Everything is neat, arranged in ordered groups, reflecting the workshop's ethos of precision and respect for materials. Gold, you notice, is never treated casually here. Even the tiniest fragment is valued, carefully preserved for future use. Archaeological evidence supports this. Morodic sites often reveal tiny scraps of gold, sometimes partially worked, recycled into later creations. Historians still debate whether this practice was primarily economical, symbolic, or a combination, but the care shown suggests an intrinsic reverence for precious materials. The goldsmith now examines the clasp, flexing it gently to ensure it functions without strain. Tap, adjust. The mechanism is simple, yet effective: a small hook and loop reinforced with subtle granules and filigree to blend seamlessly with the necklace S design. Even these functional details reflect aesthetic sensibility, demonstrating that utility and beauty were inseparable in Kushite craftsmanship. You imagine a queen or high-ranking official securing this necklace around her neck, confident that it will hold through movement, ceremony, and time. A quirky tidbit: some scholars speculate that certain necklaces may have incorporated hidden sound element steeny beads or metal attachments that produced a faint chime when worn. While definitive evidence is sparse, the idea adds a layer of intrigue. Imagine walking through a temple procession and the necklace softly announcing your presence, subtly amplifying status without ostentation. The central plaque's engraved ram continues to draw your gaze. Its spirals and contours, framed by delicate granulation, demonstrate not only technical skill but also cultural symbolism. Rams were often associated with vitality, leadership, or protection, depending on context. Mainstream historians recognize animal motifs as integral to Meroitic visual language, bridging daily life, ritual practice, and political symbolism. Historians still argue over the precise interpretation of some motifs, debating whether they convey religious, dynastic, or purely decorative messages. The goldsmith lifts the necklace to inspect its silhouette against the sunlit courtyard. Every strand, bead, and pendant aligns harmoniously, and even the smallest loops and granules are positioned with deliberate care. You notice how the assembly seems almost afloat, light interacting differently with each component. The combination of tactile, visual, and kinetic elements transforms the piece into more than jewelry. It's a statement of cultural identity, skill, and aesthetic mastery. The apprentice cleans the stone slab, sweeping away stray granules and dust. Even minor debris could scratch delicate surfaces during handling or transport. This meticulous attention to detail reflects both respect for material and anticipation of the necklace's ultimate purpose. Mainstream findings suggest that Kushite artisans maintained highly organized workshops with clear systems for material storage, tool management, and workflow. Historians still debate the degree of formal hierarchy versus fluid collaboration, but the efficiency in practice is evident. Sunlight continues to shift, casting fleeting patterns across the courtyard. Shadows highlight filigree curls, granule clusters, and pendant edges, revealing the depth and texture of the design. You realize that this piece is as much about light and movement as it is about gold and beads. The workshop itself becomes part of the creation, a dynamic interplay between human skill and natural elements. The goldsmith places the necklace gently onto a clean reed mat, arranging it for final inspection. Tap, adjust, lift. Tiny tweaks, imperceptible to anyone untrained, perfect the presentation. Even in stillness, the necklace radiates harmony. You feel a sense of quiet awe, appreciating not only the completed object, but also the calm, deliberate process that brought it to life. Historians still argue about the cultural and ceremonial contexts in which necklaces like this were worn. Some propose temple rituals, others suggest display during royal processions, and still others consider everyday elite adornment. From your vantage point, it's clear that these roles overlap. Status, devotion, and artistry are inseparable, woven together into a single radiant object. And as the afternoon sun continues to filter through the reeds, casting gentle, shifting light across gold and carnelian, you recognize that the necklace is no longer just metal and stone. It embodies centuries of craft knowledge, international trade, symbolic storytelling, and human patience, tangible connection between the artisans, calm afternoon labor, and the wider world of Kushite society. The necklace rests on the reed mat, catching the afternoon sunlight in a warm golden glow. You watch as the goldsmith leans closer, inspecting each loop, granule, and bead. His hands hover above the piece, fingertips brushing air rather than metal, as if gauging perfection by intuition. Every curve, every reflective surface, every pendulum swing of a carnelian bead has been meticulously planned. There is no hurry, only the steady rhythm of careful observation and fine-tuned adjustments. Even in apparent stillness, the necklace seems to pulse with quiet life, a suspended choreography of gold, stone, and motion. Nearby, the apprentice organizes remaining materials, tiny gold fragments, spare granules, and unused beads back into bowls, ensuring nothing is lost. Archaeological evidence shows that Kushite workshops prized even the smallest scraps of precious metal, often recycling them into future creations. You notice the care in these gestures. No casual tossing of materials, no reckless handling. Historians still argue whether this meticulous preservation was primarily economic, symbolic, or ritualistic, but clearly it reflects a mindset that revered gold as both material and metaphor. The goldsmith picks up a burnishing stone and begins lightly polishing the back of the necklace, where the central plaque joins secondary strands. Tap, rub, tap. The motion is gentle but deliberate, smoothing tiny irregularities invisible to the untrained eye. Mainstream evidence indicates that such finishing techniques were essential for both aesthetics and comfort, allowing jewelry to be worn without scratching skin or snagging clothing. Even hidden surfaces received attention. No part of the piece was neglected. Quirky tidbit: experimental archaeologists attempting to replicate Kushite polishing techniques found that artisans likely used natural oils or plant extracts to enhance luster and protect the surface from tarnish. You can almost smell a faint trace of such oils in the sun-warmed air, a sensory whisper of past afternoons. These tiny interventions extended the life of the jewelry and added subtle sheen, demonstrating the artisan's foresight. The goldsmith steps back and examines the necklace from multiple angles. Light reflects differently from the central ram's head, the filigree spirals, the granules, and the carnelian beads. Shadows fall in intricate patterns across the courtyard floor, echoing the necklace's design. You notice how even minute imperfections in spacing or alignment would disrupt this harmony, yet every element is precise. This is not merely ornamentation. It is a carefully orchestrated display of skill and taste. Historians still argue whether the symbolic resonance of animal motifs, like the ram's head, was intended primarily for ritual, status signaling, or artistic expression. In the courtyard, it is clear that all three converge seamlessly. The ram dominates the composition while harmonizing with surrounding elements, creating a visual narrative of power, vitality, and refinement. The apprentice carefully lifts a small carnelian bead, inspecting it for blemishes before returning it to storage. You realize that quality control, even at this micro level, was integral to workshop practice. Artisans didn't rely solely on luck. Their painstaking attention ensured consistency, quality, and durability across each commission. Sunlight shifts slightly, illuminating the filigree and causing the granules to sparkle subtly. The goldsmith tilts the necklace, observing how light interacts with each element. You imagine the effect when worn during a royal procession or temple ritual, glimmers and glints catching onlookers' attention, signaling status, devotion, and artistic mastery without a word spoken. Jewelry, in this sense, is both object and performance, static yet dynamic. Mainstream findings suggest that Meroitic necklaces often incorporated visual cues intended to interact with motion and light. Movement was part of the design. Historians still debate whether artisans planned this intentionally or refined it through iterative practice. Observing this courtyard, it's evident that intuition guided much of the artistry, calibrated by experience and cultural expectation. The goldsmith finally sets down the burnishing stone. The necklace now exudes a quiet confidence, balanced in proportion, radiating craftsmanship, and integrating symbolic and aesthetic elements. Even the clasp is discreet yet functional, completing the piece without drawing attention. The courtyard feels lighter somehow, the air more settled, as if acknowledging the labor and care poured into creation. You sit back, inhaling slowly, fully immersed in the calm rhythm of this sun-dappled workshop, where patience, skill, and subtle creativity have coalesced into something truly extraordinary. The necklace now rests fully assembled, polished, and balanced, each element harmonizing with the others in a quiet symphony of craftsmanship. You notice the central ram's head commanding subtle attention, while filigree curls, granules, and carnelian beads work together to create movement and depth. Even the pendants swing lightly with the slightest breeze, reflecting sunlight in unpredictable flashes. The calm of the courtyard makes the piece seem alive, as if it possesses a consciousness shaped by patient human hands. Watching it, you feel a connection not only to the artisans, but also to the wider world of Kushite society, trade, and tradition that birthed this creation. Nearby, the apprentice carefully sorts the remaining tools, brushes, and small containers of beads and granules, returning everything to designated spots. The workshop is meticulous, orderly, and quiet, reflecting a culture of respect for both material and process. Mainstream archaeological evidence supports this. Meroitic workshops show signs of organized storage, careful waste management, and systematic workflow. Historians still debate whether this organization indicates formal hierarchies, like guilds, or a more fluid mentorship-based system. Observing the courtyard, it seems to be a balance of both, structured guidance under the goldsmith's watchful eye, but with flexibility for apprentices to learn and contribute organically. The goldsmith now examines the necklace for final adjustments. He lightly flexes the clasp, ensuring it opens and closes smoothly, and gently wiggles each pendant, confirming balance. Tap, adjust, lift. Precision at this stage is subtle but critical. Even a minor misalignment could affect wearability or visual impact. You notice how the gold responds differently to pressure at various points, reminding you of its unique combination of softness and resilience. Every motion is a conversation with the material, a dialogue of patience and understanding. Quirky tidbit: experimental reconstructions of Kushite jewelry suggest that artisans sometimes employed small amounts of river clay or organic resin to temporarily stabilize delicate connections during assembly. These ephemeral interventions ensured accuracy before permanent fusion, demonstrating an inventive approach to problems. You can almost picture a thin smear of clay being carefully applied, then wiped away after the final adjustment of fleeting touch that left no trace in the finished piece. Sunlight shifts across the courtyard, highlighting the engraved ram's spirals, casting tiny shadows from the granules and beads, and illuminating the translucent carnelian in warm amber hues. The necklace seems to capture the changing light, becoming subtly different with every slight movement. Historians still argue whether Kushite artisans intentionally timed work to manipulate light, but surviving artifacts suggest sophisticated awareness of illumination and its role in visual presentation. The apprentice steps forward, holding a small reed mat to gently lift the necklace. The goldsmith guides his hands, ensuring no strain is placed on the delicate strands. You notice that even hand-drilling is part of the craftsmanship. The piece is treated as both object and organism, requiring attentiveness to its weight, balance, and fragility. Mainstream findings confirm that workshops often used padded surfaces or mats to prevent scratching or accidental deformation. Simple yet highly effective technique. The central plaque glows softly, the filigree curls frame it elegantly, and pendants sway slightly with ambient motion. Carnelian beads reflect light in warm flashes, integrating color, texture, and kinetic energy. Every element contributes to a narrative. Status, devotion, artistry, and trade converge in this single object. Historians still debate how much symbolic meaning was intended versus aesthetic preference, but the layering of detail suggests a conscious integration of multiple functions. Finally, the goldsmith places the necklace on a raised display board, elevating it slightly to catch the sun from all angles. Tap, adjust, lift, step back. The courtyard feels settled, as though recognizing the completion of a meticulous, patient process. You inhale deeply, feeling the calm energy of the afternoon infused in every granule, bead, and filament of gold. In this quiet moment, the necklace is more than an ornament. It is the embodiment of skill, culture, and human intention crystallized into shimmering form. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. Centuries from now, a visitor might marvel at this necklace as divine artistry, not realizing it is the product of patient labor, careful observation, and countless deliberate micro-adjustments. But perhaps that is the point. Beauty that seems effortless is always rooted in mindful effort. You watch the golden light flicker across the piece, feeling the serene pulse of creativity settle through the courtyard. Here it is, finally complete. The necklace sits on its reed display, bathing in the afternoon sun. Light catches the gold, the deep red of the carnelian, the tiny, perfect granules. I lean back, just taking it all in. The engraved ram's head, the heart of the piece, casts these miniature, intricate shadows across the filigree behind it. A gentle breeze whispers through the courtyard, and the pendants sway, making the faintest sound, like a secret being told. Every single element, even the smallest granule, plays its part. It's like a quiet symphony, where each note has been placed with absolute precision. The whole world seems to slow down, just for a moment, to honor these hours of patience and artistry. Nearby, my apprentice is sweeping up. He carefully gathers the leftover dust and stray gold granules from the stone floor, bringing order back to our workspace. Every movement is full of respect for the materials, the tools, the craft itself. This isn't just us being tidy. Archaeological finds from Meroitic workshops show they were incredibly organized. They had specific areas for raw materials, for tools, for finished pieces, and they kept everything meticulously clean. Historians debate whether this was a formal set of rules or just a tradition passed down, but either way, it worked. It helped them achieve this level of precision and kept mistakes to a minimum. I walk around the display one last time, inspecting it from every angle. I tilt the necklace, watching how the light plays differently across each surface. A little tap here, a slight adjustment there. If the alignment or tension is off by even a millimeter, it can change the whole balance, the visual harmony of the piece. You realize how alive the gold feels. It responds to touch, to temperature, to gravity. Working with it is like having a conversation with centuries of accumulated knowledge about its nature. Patience isn't just a virtue here, it's a necessary tool. Here's a fun little thought. Some modern reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans might have used finely powdered minerals, like ochre or colored stone dust, to test how light would reflect off the beads and gold before the final polish. It's like a sneak preview of the optical effects, a sort of ancient lighting design. I can just imagine this courtyard sprinkled with faint, colorful dust as artisans checked the shimmer and glow of a piece. It's a tactile, almost playful rehearsal for the final show. It shows a level of foresight and planning that is just staggering. The sun continues its slow journey across the sky. As the angle of the light changes, the engraved ram seems to come alive. The shadows from the filigree stretch and shorten, and warm flashes of red light pulse from within the carnelian beads. Did Meroitic artisans time their work to specific hours of the day? Did they use the changing sunlight to check their progress and optimize the visual impact? We can't know for sure, but when you see this, you know they had a profound understanding of how light interacts with their creations. Every angle, every tilt, is designed to enhance this dynamic effect, making the necklace captivating whether it's perfectly still or in motion. My apprentice brings a small, soft brush and lightly sweeps away the last invisible dust particles from the necklace. I nod in approval and step back again, this time looking at the overall silhouette. I even check the clasp. It has to be functional, of course, but the mechanism is so beautifully integrated into the design that it almost disappears. This is something we see a lot in Kushite work. Functional elements are hidden in plain sight, becoming part of the beauty. It contributes to this feeling of effortless perfection. Was this just an aesthetic choice, or was it a status symbol, a way of saying, our skill is so great, we can make even the mundane parts beautiful? Historians are still discussing it. I think it's probably both. The central plaque just radiates this quiet authority. The tiny granules emphasize its curves, the delicate filigree frames it, and the pendants sway with the slightest movement of air. The carnelian beads are like punctuation marks, adding warmth and tying the whole composition together. This isn't just an ornament, it's a statement. It's a story told in gold and stone, a narrative of skill, of culture, of trade routes that stretched across continents. As I stand here, I can feel the slow, meditative rhythm of the afternoon, a pace that perfectly mirrors the care and deliberation that went into the necklace's creation. Finally, I step aside. The work is done. A few minimal corrections for maximum effect. The courtyard settles into a soft, reflective silence. I take a deep breath, absorbing the quiet satisfaction of completion. Every granule, every loop of wire, every bead is exactly where it should be, aligned and polished to perfection. The light interacts with the surfaces exactly as I had envisioned. Shadows trace the curls of filigree, and the pendants catch the faint breeze. In this moment, I realize that this calm, deliberate labor is the physical embodiment of centuries of skill, cultural knowledge, and artistic sensibility. A quiet afternoon in a simple courtyard has been transformed into a piece of enduring art. A thought drifts through my mind. We often think of perfection in art as something effortless, something magical. But maybe that's not it at all. Maybe perfection isn't the absence of effort, but the visible presence of attentive, patient, mindful care. This necklace is a testament to that idea. It speaks of the dedication, the intuition, and the refined skill of the Kushite artisans who came before me. And here, in the soft light of the courtyard, it feels as if time itself has paused just for a moment to admire it. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of ancient craftsmanship. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the world of a Meroitic goldsmith, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories forged in fire and time. See you again soon. The calm afternoon stretches onward, and you notice how the necklace now seems almost alive in its sunlit display. The central ram's head dominates gracefully, while filigree curls, clusters of granules, and carnelian beads create subtle movement and texture. Pendants sway gently in the faint breeze, producing barely audible, delicate sounds, a whisper of gold and stone that harmonizes with the quiet hum of the courtyard. You realize that the piece functions on multiple sensory levels: visual, tactile, and even a faint auditory presence. Each element contributes to a narrative of balance, elegance, and cultural sophistication. Nearby, the apprentice carefully arranges extra granules, small wires, and leftover beads into neat trays, ensuring everything is accounted for. Archaeological evidence indicates that Kushite workshops maintained meticulous organization, reflecting not only efficiency, but also respect for materials. You notice that even minor pieces, tiny scraps of gold, are treated as valuable resources, often recycled into future work. Historians still argue whether this practice was primarily economic, symbolic, or a blend of both, but the care and mindfulness are unmistakable. The goldsmith picks up a small burnishing stone and revisits the necklace for final subtle touches. He lightly glides the stone along filigree edges, adjusts the alignment of pendants by millimeters, and inspects each granule for consistency. Tap, adjust, lift. Even the smallest correction subtly enhances harmony, showing how human perception of proportion and rhythm informs each action. The courtyard feels suspended in this slow, deliberate process, as though the very air is participating in the artistry. quirky tidbit, experimental reconstructions, suggest that Kushite artisans may have used thin brushes of plant fiber to remove tiny dust particles between steps. A method both practical and gentle. You imagine a delicate sweep across filigree curls and granules, a nearly imperceptible movement that preserves perfection. Tiny acts of care like this accumulate into extraordinary results, even if they go unnoticed by anyone outside the workshop. Sunlight shifts across the courtyard, glinting off the polished gold and refracting through the translucent carnelian beads. Shadows trace intricate patterns across the ground, echoing the necklace's design. Mainstream research suggests that artisans were acutely aware of these effects, arranging elements to optimize the interplay of light and movement. Historians still debate whether light considerations were intentional or emerged from iterative practice, but the results speak for themselves. The goldsmith gently flexes the clasp, ensuring it opens smoothly and closes securely. Tap, lift, adjust. You notice that even this functional detail is designed with aesthetic sensitivity. The clasp blends seamlessly with the necklace's form, invisible to the casual observer, yet essential for wearability. Moraitic studies show that such integration of function and beauty was a hallmark of Kushite jewelry, reinforcing social status and cultural sophistication. The central plaque, filigree, and granules now seem perfectly integrated, each supporting the others in subtle visual balance. Pendants and beads interact with light and motion, creating a dynamic visual narrative. Even in the stillness of the courtyard, the necklace radiates life, reflecting patience, skill, and cultural knowledge. You feel the slow rhythm of the afternoon, aligning your awareness with the careful cadence of creation. Finally, the goldsmith steps back, letting the necklace rest undisturbed on the display mat. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor calibrations are complete. The courtyard settles into quiet harmony, sunlight shimmering across gold and carnelian. You inhale slowly, feeling the serene satisfaction of completion. Every element, granule, loop, bead, pendant, and clasp occupies its intended place, fully realized. In this calm space, the necklace is more than an object. It is a culmination of skill, cultural identity, and meditative artistry captured in gold and stone. A gentle thought drifts through your mind. True mastery is often invisible, emerging from countless small decisions, repeated actions, and patient attention. This necklace embodies that principle. As the afternoon wanes, the workshop seems to exhale in quiet admiration, the golden piece radiating calm confidence and enduring beauty. And you notice how the necklace seems to respond, catching light differently with each subtle shift. The central ram's head, filigree curls, granules, and carnelian beads all interact with this gentle change, highlighting textures and patterns that were previously more muted. Pendants sway imperceptibly in the soft breeze, producing a faint clink, like a whispered echo of the workshop's meticulous labor. You realize that even in apparent stillness, the necklace communicates life, rhythm, and balance. A miniature world suspended in gold and stone. Nearby, the apprentice gathers leftover wires, small tools, and unused granules, returning them to neatly organized containers. Mainstream evidence shows that Kushite workshops were consistently methodical. Every material had its place, and no fragment of gold was wasted. Historians still debate whether this meticulous organization was primarily for efficiency, aesthetic pride, or ritual significance, but the care and mindfulness in practice are unmistakable. You notice how these small acts reflect a philosophy of respect for both material and process, a calm attention that permeates every aspect of the courtyard. The goldsmith now inspects the necklace for subtle alignment corrections. He lifts it, rotates it slightly, and adjusts pendants and granules with careful precision. Tap, adjust, lift even. Minor variations in spacing can disrupt the harmony of motion and visual flow. You observe how gold responds to touch, its softness accommodating fine adjustments while retaining structural integrity. Every movement is a dialogue with the material, guided by experience and intuition, creating a living balance between function and beauty. Quirky tidbit, experimental reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans occasionally used soft animal brushes to remove dust and fine particles between polishing and final assembly. These nearly imperceptible gestures preserved the delicate surfaces while maintaining the rhythmic workflow of the workshop. You imagine the apprentice sweeping gently across the filigree and granules. Tiny, purposeful movements that accumulate into a flawless final product. Sunlight continues to shift, illuminating different facets of the necklace with each passing minute. Shadows trace intricate curls, highlighting granules, and warm tones shimmer from carnelian beads. Mainstream scholarship suggests that Kushite artisans were highly aware of such optical effects, intentionally arranging elements to enhance interplay with natural light. Historians still debate whether these lighting considerations were systematic or emerged from trial and error practice over generations. But the results reveal extraordinary visual sophistication. The goldsmith flexes the clasp one last time, ensuring smooth function and seamless integration into the overall design. Even utilitarian elements are executed with aesthetic awareness, blending practicality and elegance. Archaeological findings show that such subtle integration was typical in elite Meroitic jewelry, demonstrating that function never compromised visual or symbolic impact. You note how this balance mirrors a larger philosophy. Each detail, no matter how small, contributes to harmony and enduring beauty. The necklaces, pendants, and beads respond to the faint afternoon breeze, casting moving reflections and creating an almost hypnotic shimmer. Granules catch the light like tiny stars. Filigree curls guide the eye around the central plaque, and carnelian beads add warmth and depth. You feel the rhythm of the courtyard, the meditative cadence of creation, echoing through each element. Every detail embodies patience, skill, and knowledge passed down through generations. Finally, the goldsmith steps back and allows the necklace to rest undisturbed on the display mat. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor calibrations are complete. The courtyard absorbs a calm, quiet energy, the kind that emerges only after hours of meticulous, deliberate effort. You inhale slowly, feeling the serene satisfaction of completion. Each granule, loop, and pendant is precisely where it should be. The result of careful observation, intentional decision-making, and deep understanding of material, form, and cultural symbolism. The sun dips lower, and the courtyard is bathed in a mellow amber glow, softening shadows and highlighting the necklace's intricate details. You notice how the central ram's head seems to take on a new dimension under this warm light. Its engraved spirals cast delicate shadows on surrounding filigree and granules, shimmers subtly reflecting every tiny adjustment the artisans made. Pendants sway ever so gently, catching slivers of sunlight that dance across the polished gold and carnelian beads. Even the quietest moments feel alive, infused with the cumulative labor of patience, skill, and mindful attention. Nearby, the apprentice wipes down the workspace, sweeping stray granules and dust into neat containers. Mainstream archaeological evidence supports the idea that Kushite workshops prioritized cleanliness and organization. Tools, materials, and work surfaces were systematically managed. Historians still debate whether such meticulous care had ritual, economic, or purely practical origins, but it is clear that workshop discipline ensured precision and allowed artisans to work with confidence. You notice that even the smallest gestures, the placement of a bowl, or the careful handling of a bead reflect a philosophy of respect for both craft and material. The goldsmith picks up a small burnishing stone and returns to the necklace. Moving along the edges of filigree curls, the back of the central plaque, and individual granules. Tap, rub, adjust. His motions are fluid, yet deliberate, testing surfaces for smoothness and visual cohesion. You realize that polishing is not simply aesthetic. It is the final act that unites function, symbolism, and artistry. Every reflective surface enhances how light interacts with the piece, bringing motion, depth, and subtle drama to a static object. Quirky tidbit: some experimental reconstructions suggest Kushite artisans might have occasionally used tiny fragments of fine stone or river sand as gentle abrasives, subtly refining surfaces before final burnishing. You imagine these nearly invisible grains contributing to perfection in ways the human eye might never notice, an ancient tactile secret shared between material and artisan. Sunlight filters through the reed canopy, casting irregular patterns of warmth across gold and carnelian. Shadows trace filigree, curls, and accentuate the raised granules, creating an almost three-dimensional effect. Mainstream findings indicate that Kushite jewelers were acutely aware of these light effects and may have timed work to optimize illumination. Historians still argue whether this awareness was intuitive or systematic, but the results speak to an advanced understanding of visual perception and presentation. The goldsmith now gently tests the clasp, ensuring smooth movement and proper tension. Even this utilitarian component is refined to blend seamlessly with the overall design. Merodic findings confirm that such integration was typical in elite jewelry. Functional elements were hidden in plain sight, maintaining aesthetic harmony. You notice how this subtlety mirrors a larger ethos. Every detail, no matter how practical, is treated as part of the narrative, contributing to the visual and symbolic coherence of the piece. The necklace, suspended slightly on its reed mat, responds to the faint afternoon breeze. Pendants sway, granules shimmer, and carnelian beads glow warmly. You notice how the composition seems dynamic. Despite being still, each element interacting with light and motion. It embodies a story of patience, deliberate practice, and cultural expression of quiet reflection of centuries of accumulated knowledge. Finally, the goldsmith takes a step back, hands folded, surveying the completed work. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor calibrations are done. The courtyard settles into a meditative calm. You inhale slowly, absorbing the serene satisfaction of witnessing completion. The necklace now exists not just as ornament, but as an enduring testament to skill, intuition, and cultural sophistication. Every bead, granule, filigree, curl, and pendant is aligned, polished, and integrated into a harmonious whole. The afternoon light softens further, bathing the courtyard in golden hues that accentuate every curve and angle of the necklace. The central ram's head gleams subtly, its engraved spirals creating shifting shadows across the filigree frame. Granules sparkle like tiny droplets of sunlight, while pendants and carnelian beads catch and refract light in gentle flashes. You notice how even slight air currents set the pendants in motion, producing soft, almost imperceptible clinks that harmonize with the quiet rhythm of the courtyard. It's mesmerizing, a delicate choreography of gold, stone, and light unfolding before you. Nearby, the apprentice organizes tools and remaining materials, stacking bowls of granules, wires, and beads with careful precision. Mainstream archaeology shows that Kushite workshops were remarkably orderly, with clear systems for storing raw materials, in-process work, and finished pieces. Historians still debate whether this system was born of efficiency, ritual practice, or aesthetic discipline, but its impact is undeniable. It allowed artisans to maintain focus, reduce errors, and treat every element with reverent care. You notice that even the smallest gesture, the tilt of a bowl, or the careful placement of a bead, speaks to a workshop culture rooted in precision and mindfulness. The goldsmith returns to the necklace, performing subtle final inspections. He lifts, tilts, and flexes the piece, checking the balance of pendants, the alignment of granules, and the gleam of the polished filigree. Tap, adjust, lift. Each movement is minimal but transformative, ensuring that the necklace communicates symmetry, harmony, and refinement from every angle. You realize that this is the quiet heart of mastery, the patience to make minute adjustments until every detail feels inevitable and complete. Quirky tidbit, experimental reconstructions suggest that some Kushite artisans may have temporarily heated granules or beads just enough to soften them slightly for precise placement. A delicate practice requiring intuition and touch. You imagine a bead being held briefly over a warm ember, subtle heat guiding it into the perfect spot. Fleeting, almost magical technique that leaves no trace but ensures perfection. Sunlight glances off the central plaque and carnelian beads, creating reflections that shift as the day progresses. Mainstream scholarship confirms that artisans were attuned to such optical effects, arranging jewelry to interact dynamically with natural light. Historians still debate whether these lighting effects were planned deliberately or emerged through iterative experience, but the skill involved is undeniable. Watching it now, you understand how visual storytelling and technical mastery were inseparable in Kushite jewelry. The goldsmith examines the clasp one final time, ensuring smooth function and discreet integration. Even functional elements are treated as aesthetic opportunities, maintaining balance and visual cohesion. Merodic studies indicate that this subtle integration of utility and beauty was typical, ensuring that wearability never compromised elegance. You notice how this philosophy mirrors the broader approach to craft. Every action, no matter how small or practical, contributes to the overall narrative of skill and refinement. The necklace responds gently to the courtyard breeze. Pendants sway, granules twinkle, and carnelian beads glow in warm flashes. Each component interacts with light, motion, and shadow, creating a dynamic composition that seems alive despite its static materials. It embodies patience, practice, and cultural knowledge, the cumulative effort of artisans, apprentices, and tradition converging in a single object. Finally, the goldsmith steps back, surveying the piece with quiet satisfaction. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor calibrations are complete. The courtyard feels suspended and calm, the sunlight soft on stone and reed. You inhale slowly, feeling the serene culmination of hours of attentive labor. Every bead, granule, loop, filigree, curl, and pendant is harmonized, polished, and aligned. In this soft afternoon light, the necklace is no longer just a creation, it is a living testament to human skill, patience, and the quiet power of sustained artistry. The sun edges toward the horizon, spilling warmer amber tones across the courtyard. You watch as the necklace seems to transform under this shifting light. The central ram-S head now casts elongated, delicate shadows across the filigree. Granules glint like distant stars, and carnelian beads glow with a fiery depth. Pendants swing in the faint evening breeze, producing soft, rhythmic clinks that harmonize with the slow, calm energy of the workshop. Each element appears both delicate and deliberate, a visual and auditory meditation frozen in motion. Nearby, the apprentice continues tidying up, placing leftover beads, granules, and small wires back into containers, brushing the mat to remove any stray dust. Archaeological evidence shows that Kushite workshops were highly organized, reflecting both practical needs and reverence for precious materials. Historians still argue whether such meticulous practices were driven more by efficiency, ritual observance, or pride in craftsmanship. But observing this calm, deliberate process, it's clear that attention to detail was essential to the creation of perfection. The goldsmith revisits the necklace for subtle final adjustments. He lifts it carefully, tilts it slightly, and uses the tip of a small tool to nudge a pendant or adjust the alignment of a granule. Tap, adjust, lift. Even imperceptible modifications alter the overall rhythm and harmony. You realize that this is a signature of true mastery, the ability to perceive minuscule inconsistencies and correct them with patience and precision, ensuring the piece conveys balance, elegance, and intention. Quirky tidbit. Some experimental reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans may have occasionally used tiny brushes made from plant fibers to sweep dust and particles from intricate filigree and granulation. This nearly invisible practice preserved delicate surfaces while allowing artisans to maintain workflow and continuity. You imagine a gentle, almost ceremonial sweep across the necklace, each brushstroke reinforcing care and mindfulness. Sunlight falls in shifting beams, illuminating the necklace's facets in unexpected ways. The central plaque glows, granules sparkle, and pendants catch the light at different angles. Mainstream research confirms that Meroitic jewelers were attuned to how light interacted with materials, arranging beads, pendants, and filigree for maximum visual impact. Historians still debate whether these effects were planned with intentional precision or developed through accumulated experience over generations, but the results show extraordinary sophistication. The goldsmith checks the clasp once more, ensuring it is smooth, functional, and subtly integrated. Even utilitarian elements are treated as extensions of design, maintaining the piece's overall harmony. Archaeological findings suggest this was a common practice. Functional components were visually discrete, yet structurally secure, marrying practicality and artistry seamlessly. You notice how the subtle elegance of the clasp mirrors the larger philosophy of the workshop, where every small decision contributes to the whole. The necklace responds gently to the soft evening air. Pendants sway, granules catch stray beams of sunlight, and carnelian beads shine warmly. The piece embodies patience, skill, and cultural knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of artisans who understood material, symbolism, and visual storytelling. You feel the courtyard's meditative rhythm, each soft sound and shifting shadow harmonizing with the calm, intentional pace of work. Finally, the goldsmith steps back completely, allowing the necklace to rest undisturbed on the display mat. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor refinements are done. The courtyard settles into a peaceful hush, sunlight soft across stone and red mats. You inhale slowly, taking in the serene culmination of careful labor. Every bead, granule, filigree, curl, pendant, and loop now resides perfectly in place. In this quiet, amberlit courtyard, the necklace is more than an object. It is a living testament to skill, patience, and human artistry, a golden story told without words, yet resonating across centuries. The light has softened into a gentle, late-afternoon glow, warming the courtyard in honeyed tones. You notice the necklace now appears almost ethereal, the central ram's head casting faint, elongated shadows across the polished filigree, granules catching glimmers of fading sunlight, and carnelian beads glowing like tiny embers. Pendants sway subtly with the breeze, producing soft, irregular clinks that harmonize with the quiet rhythm of the workshop. There's a meditative calm to the scene, a serene resonance born from hours of careful attention, patience, and repetition. Nearby, the apprentice organizes remaining tools and materials, ensuring that every bowl of granules, beads, and wires is returned to its designated place. Archaeological evidence indicates that Kushite workshops were meticulously structured, reflecting both practical considerations and a profound respect for precious materials. Historians still debate whether this system was primarily pragmatic, ritualistic, or a mixture of both, but the result is clear. A workspace designed to foster precision, concentration, and reverence for the craft. The goldsmith revisits the necklace for subtle final adjustments. He lifts it slightly, tilts it, and nudges a pendant or a granule with the tip of a fine tool. Tap, adjust, lift. Even minor corrections subtly influence symmetry, balance, and visual rhythm. You realize that true mastery lies in these nearly invisible acts, discerning minuscule imperfections and refining them until the piece appears effortless, harmonious, and complete. Quirky tidbit: experimental reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans may have occasionally employed tiny amounts of plant resin or beeswax to temporarily stabilize delicate granules and pendants during placement. These fleeting interventions allowed precise adjustments before permanent setting, leaving no trace in the final piece. You can almost picture a thin, glistening film holding a bead in place for a moment, a tiny secret of perfection passed down through generations. Sunlight now brushes the necklace from multiple angles, illuminating facets, casting shadows, and revealing subtle interplay among granules, filigree curls, and carnelian beads. Mainstream studies confirm that Kushite artisans were keenly aware of light effects, arranging components to enhance reflections and motion. Historians still argue whether this awareness was deliberate or evolved through practice, but the resulting visual sophistication is undeniable. The goldsmith gently tests the clasp again, ensuring smooth function and seamless integration with the necklace's form. Functional elements are carefully designed to be almost invisible, a hallmark of Kushite elite jewelry. You notice how this subtle integration mirrors the broader philosophy of the workshop. Every small decision, every adjustment, contributes to the unity, elegance, and longevity of the piece. The pendants sway gently in the cooling breeze. Granules sparkle, and carnelian beads glow softly. The necklace exudes calm precision, reflecting centuries of accumulated skill, cultural knowledge, and meditative craftsmanship. You feel the rhythm of the courtyard soft, deliberate, and harmonious, and recognize the quiet, almost spiritual dimension of the artisan's work. Finally, the goldsmith steps back fully, letting the necklace rest undisturbed on its mat. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor refinements are complete. The courtyard absorbs a serene hush, sunlight warming stone and reeds. You inhale slowly, taking in the culmination of patient, attentive labor. Every granule, bead, filigree, curl, loop, and pendant is in place, polished, and harmonized. In this tranquil space, the necklace becomes more than a creation. It embodies skill, culture, and human care, glowing gently as a testament to centuries of artistry. Evening approaches, and the courtyard bathes in soft amber light, stretching shadows across the mat where the necklace rests. The central ram's head seems almost alive, its engraved spirals casting delicate shadow patterns across filigree curls. Granules twinkle faintly, and carnelian beads catch the warm rays, glowing from within. Pendants sway in a gentle breeze, producing barely audible clinks that harmonize with the serene atmosphere. You feel the slow pulse of the workshop, the quiet rhythm of patient hands, and the meditative cadence of a day spent in meticulous creation. Nearby, the apprentice gathers remaining materials, arranging beads, granules, and small tools into orderly containers. Archaeological evidence confirms that Kushite workshops were highly organized, reflecting both practical efficiency and deep respect for precious materials. Historians still debate whether this meticulous order was rooted in economic necessity, ritual significance, or aesthetic discipline. But the outcome is clear. Precision, mindfulness, and focus dominate the space. Even the smallest gesture, the careful alignment of a bead or placement of a bowl, embodies centuries of tradition and careful attention. The goldsmith returns for one final inspection of the necklace. He lifts it gently, tilts it, and adjusts a pendant or granule by millimeters. Tap, adjust. Lift, even minute corrections. Refine balance, symmetry, and visual harmony. You notice how gold responds with subtle resilience to his touch, accommodating small modifications without losing shape. Each motion is deliberate, a dialogue between human intention and material properties, resulting in a piece that seems effortless, yet embodies extraordinary skill. Quirky tidbit: some experimental reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans may have temporarily applied fine powders, such as crushed minerals, or plant dust to preview how light would reflect across beads and filigree before final polishing. These ephemeral interventions allowed for subtle adjustments to shimmer and glow. You can almost imagine a thin, barely visible, dusting-enhancing brilliance, a secret gesture of patience and creativity. The light shifts slowly across the courtyard, illuminating the necklace from multiple angles. Mainstream research shows that Meroitic jewelers understood these optical effects, arranging components to optimize light interaction, motion, and depth. Historians still debate whether such sophistication was planned deliberately or honed through generations of experience, but the result is visually striking. A necklace alive with shimmer, shadow, and texture. The goldsmith tests the clasp one final time, ensuring smooth functionality and invisible integration with the design. Functional elements are harmonized with aesthetics, demonstrating that utility never compromises elegance. Archaeological studies indicate that this was a hallmark of elite Meroitic jewelry, with practical features seamlessly woven into the visual narrative. You notice how this approach mirrors the philosophy of the workshop. Every choice, no matter how minor, contributes to the overall impression of skill, balance, and sophistication. The pendants sway gently, granules sparkle, and carnelian beads glow in the soft, warm light. The necklace embodies patience, cultural knowledge, and accumulated skill, a quiet testament to centuries of Kushite artistry. You feel the rhythm of the courtyard, a calm, meditative pulse created by thoughtful work and intentional movement. Finally, the goldsmith steps back, hands folded, surveying the completed piece. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor refinements are complete. The courtyard settles into a hush, the warm evening light soft across stone and red mats. You inhale slowly, fully aware of the culmination of attentive labor. Every bead, granule, filigree, curl, pendant, and loop now rests perfectly. In this tranquil courtyard, the necklace is no longer just jewelry, is a living testament to human care, patience, and artistry, glowing quietly as a symbol of mastery and cultural legacy. Twilight deepens, and the courtyard is suffused with soft, diffuse light, turning gold and carnelian into warmer, muted tones. You notice how the central ram's head now seems almost three-dimensional, its engraved spirals casting delicate, shifting shadows across the surrounding filigree. Granules glimmer subtly, pendants sway with barely perceptible clinks, and carnelian beads catch the fading light, producing a warm, soft glow. Even in near stillness, the necklace seems alive, its movement and reflections quietly echoing the hours of meticulous care and attention invested by the artisans. Nearby, the apprentice methodically clears the last traces of debris, organizing granules, beads, and small wires into their designated containers. Mainstream archaeological findings indicate that Kushite workshops were remarkably orderly, reflecting both efficiency and reverence for materials. Historians still debate whether this precision was more practical, symbolic, or aesthetic in motivation, but the effect is undeniable. A workspace designed to support meticulous patient labor, every small gesture the careful placement of a bead. The alignment of a tool demonstrates a philosophy of mindfulness and respect for craft. the goldsmith returns to the necklace for subtle, final calibrations. He lifts it gently, adjusts a pendant by millimeters, and inspects granules for even spacing. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor corrections refine balance, visual rhythm, and overall harmony. You notice how gold, though soft, responds with just enough resilience to allow precise modifications. Each action is deliberate, a quiet dialogue between human intention and material properties, creating an object that appears effortless, yet embodies extraordinary skill and care. Quirky tidbit: some experimental reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans may have used tiny amounts of honey or plant-based resin as a temporary adhesive to stabilize delicate granules or pendants during final adjustments. These ephemeral interventions ensured perfect alignment before permanent setting, leaving no trace in the finished piece. You can imagine a barely visible drop of resin, a tiny secret behind flawless execution, almost like magic in miniature. The shifting light highlights subtle interactions among the necklace's components. Shadows trace filigree curls, granules sparkle, and carnelian beads glow from within. Mainstream studies indicate that Meroitic jewelers were acutely aware of these optical effects, arranging elements to maximize reflections, depth, and motion. Historians still argue whether such awareness was intentional or learned through repeated practice, but the results reveal extraordinary sophistication. The goldsmith checks the clasp one last time. Smooth function, subtle integration, invisible elegance. Functional elements are harmonized with design, demonstrating that utility and beauty are inseparable. Archaeological studies suggest that this was a defining feature of elite Kushite jewelry, blending practicality with aesthetic refinement. You notice how this philosophy extends to every detail of the workshop. Deliberate, attentive choices shape every stage of production. The necklace responds gently to the faint evening breeze. Pendants sway, granules twinkle, and carnelian beads catch soft light. The piece exudes quiet mastery, cultural knowledge, and meditative patience. You feel the rhythm of the courtyard, calm, deliberate, and harmonious, reflecting the artistry of the afternoon and the accumulated wisdom of generations of Kushite goldsmiths. Finally, the goldsmith steps back, hands folded, surveying the completed work. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor refinements are complete. The courtyard absorbs a tranquil hush. You inhale slowly, savoring the culmination of careful, attentive labor. Every bead, granule, filigree, curl, pendant, and loop now rests in perfect alignment. In the soft twilight, the necklace becomes more than an object, is a living testament to patience, skill, and artistry, glowing as a symbol of enduring craftsmanship and cultural legacy. Night approaches, and the courtyard is enveloped in the soft, fading glow of twilight. The necklace rests on its red mat, bathed in dim, warm light that accentuates the depth of the carnelian beads and the subtle gleam of polished gold. The central ram's head seems almost sentient, its engraved spirals catching the last light and casting delicate shadows across the filigree. Granules sparkle faintly, and pendants sway gently in the cooling evening breeze, producing barely audible, soothing clinks that harmonize with the hushed rhythm of the workshop. You realize that in this stillness, the necklace communicates patience, care, and quiet mastery more powerfully than any words could. Nearby, the apprentice ensures the workspace is fully organized, stacking empty bowls, tidying tools, and returning remaining beads and granules to storage. Archaeological studies indicate that Kushite workshops maintained such meticulous order consistently. Reflecting respect for materials and structured workflow, historians still debate whether this level of organization was primarily functional, symbolic, or aesthetic. But observing the calm, deliberate movements in the courtyard, the rationale seems to blend all three. Even the smallest gestures, lining a bead or carefully lifting a tool, carry the imprint of centuries of tradition. The goldsmith performs one last inspection of the necklace. He tilts it, rotates it, and gently nudges pendants and granules for perfect alignment. Tap, adjust, lift. The tiniest modifications subtly enhance balance, rhythm, and visual harmony. You notice how gold responds to touch. Soft enough to allow adjustments, but resilient enough to maintain shape, each movement a dialogue between artisan and material. This quiet attention, repeated over hours, transforms raw materials into a coherent, graceful, and enduring work of art. Quirky tidbit: Some experimental reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans occasionally used fine powdered clay or mineral dust to preview light reflections on intricate filigree before final polishing. You can imagine a thin dusting brushing across granules, catching light just long enough to inform placement decisions of fleeting. Almost playful ritual that ensured perfection without leaving a trace. Sunlight has almost entirely faded, but residual warmth highlights filigree curls, glimmers on granules, and warms the translucence of carnelian beads. Mainstream evidence shows that Meroitic jewelers understood the interplay of light and motion, arranging elements to optimize shimmer, depth, and dynamic visual storytelling. Historians still debate whether this awareness was deliberate or emerged gradually through generational experience. But the outcome is undeniably sophisticated. The goldsmith checks the clasp one final time, ensuring it operates smoothly and integrates seamlessly with the design. Functional components are subtly refined to maintain harmony and elegance, illustrating the principle that utility never detracts from beauty. Archaeological findings indicate that Kushite artisans consistently blended aesthetics with practicality, achieving an understated perfection that reinforced both status and craftsmanship. The necklace responds to the faint nighttime breeze. Pendants sway gently. Granules catch the last traces of light, and carnelian beads radiate soft warmth. You feel the rhythm of the courtyard, a quiet, meditative pulse that mirrors the care and patience embedded in each element of the necklace. Its beauty is both material and ephemeral, a synthesis of light, motion, and intention that will endure beyond this single evening. Finally, the goldsmith steps back, hands folded, surveying the necklace in its twilight state. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor refinements are complete. The courtyard settles into deep calm. You inhale slowly, absorbing the serene culmination of hours of deliberate labor. Every granule, loop, bead, filigree, curl, pendant, and clasp rests perfectly. In the soft embrace of night, the necklace is more than a piece of jewelry. It is a living testament to skill, patience, and artistry, a symbol of enduring human care and cultural heritage. Night deepens, and the courtyard is cloaked in a gentle, velvety darkness, punctuated by the faint glow of a few lingering embers of twilight. The necklace rests on its reed mat, the central ram's head subtly catching residual light, granules twinkling faintly, and carnelian beads glowing like tiny embers. Pendants sway softly in the cooling evening breeze, producing delicate, almost hypnotic clinks that harmonize with the quiet pulse of the workshop. You notice the interplay of shadows and light on the filigree, how even in darkness the meticulous craftsmanship remains perceptible, a testament to the artisan's patience and attention. Nearby, the apprentice completes the final tidying, stacking bowls, returning stray beads and granules, and ensuring tools are stored properly. Archaeological evidence shows that Kushite workshops consistently maintained such organization, reflecting both practical and cultural values. Historians still debate whether this meticulous order was motivated more by economy, ritual observance, or aesthetic pride, but it clearly enabled precision, focus, and respect for the materials at hand. Every movement, every careful gesture, enforces a philosophy of mindful work and reverence for craft. The goldsmith conducts a final, lingering inspection of the necklace. He lifts it slightly, tilts it, and adjusts a pendant or granule with minute precision. Tap, adjust, lift. Even the tiniest correction influences the visual rhythm and balance. You notice how gold, though soft and malleable, holds its form with grace, allowing these final refinements to bring the piece to harmonious completion. The meditative pace, the almost imperceptible movements underscore a quiet mastery, perfection achieved through patience, observation, and skilled hands. Quirky tidbit: some experimental reconstructions suggest that Kushite artisans may have used a combination of natural oils and gentle heat to enhance the luster of gold and carnelian during final finishing. You can almost sense a faint, lingering warmth from such careful treatment. Invisible now, but imprinted in the sheen and glow of the materials. These subtle techniques highlight the ingenuity and intimate knowledge of materials passed down through generations. The courtyard is now fully immersed in evening calm. Shadows lengthen, and the last traces of sunlight shimmer on filigree curls, granules, and pendants. Mainstream scholarship notes that Kushite artisans were highly attuned to light effects, crafting pieces to maximize optical interplay, reflection, and movement. Historians still argue whether this attention was systematic or emerged intuitively, but the aesthetic sophistication is unmistakable. The necklace, even at rest, seems dynamic, alive in memory, intention, and material harmony. The goldsmith performs a final clasp check. Smooth function, seamless integration, perfect discretion. The utility is invisible, leaving the visual and symbolic narrative undisturbed. Merodic jewelry consistently demonstrates this integration, where practical elements are harmonized with artistic intent. You sense how every detail in this courtyard, every granule, loop, pendant, and bead reflects thoughtful, deliberate craftsmanship that is both functional and poetic. Pendulums sway gently, granules twinkle faintly, and carnelian beads glow softly. The necklace radiates skill, patience, cultural knowledge, and quiet human care. You feel the courtyard's rhythm, the meditative pulse of hours of attentive work, now embedded into a single cohesive object. It is more than jewelry. It is storytelling, ritual, artistry, and history frozen in a delicate, radiant form. Finally, the goldsmith steps back fully, hands folded, surveying the completed piece. Tap, adjust, lift. Minor refinements are complete. The courtyard absorbs a deep, peaceful hush. You inhale slowly, sensing the serene culmination of patient, mindful labor. Every granule, bead, filigree, curl, pendant, and loop rests perfectly. In this quiet, twilight-filled courtyard, the necklace is no longer just an ornament. It is a living testament to skill, care, and artistry, glowing as a symbol of enduring craftsmanship and cultural legacy. The courtyard has fully surrendered to night, and the necklace lies quietly on its reed mat, bathed in a soft, silver-blue glow. The ram's head no longer dominates with its midday brightness, but instead, it watches gently, a silent sentinel over filigree curls, glimmering granules, and warm carnelian beads. The pendants sway faintly in the cool evening breeze, producing barely audible clinks that echoes softly against the stone floor. You breathe slowly, feeling your own pulse align with the gentle rhythm of the courtyard, as if the day's labor, the patience, and the care have infused the air itself with calm. Nearby, the apprentice has finished tidying. Tools and materials carefully stored, leaving only the quiet presence of the goldsmith and the completed necklace. The soft rustle of leaves and the occasional whisper of wind through the reeds become companions in this tranquil scene. You notice that even shadows now feel gentle, wrapping the courtyard in a delicate embrace. The intricate gold and carnelian elements, once bright and reflective, have softened into a harmonious interplay of light and dark, texture and tone. Each detail seems to exhale slowly, like the courtyard itself is resting after a day of focused, deliberate creation. You remember the tiny gestures that went into the necklace, granules aligned with millimeter precision, pendants delicately balanced, and subtle adjustments made with intuitive expertise. The quiet ingenuity of Kushite artisans, the gentle heating of beads, the sweep of fine brushes, the strategic use of natural oils resonates in this stillness, a silent narrative of human care and attentiveness. Historians still argue about the symbolic intent of motifs or the precise methods used. Yet here, in this calm night, their debates feel distant. What remains is the tangible proof of patience and artistry embodied in every curve of gold, every glint of carnelian, every filigree twist. Your eyes trace the necklace's contours, noting how shadows stretch and bend softly across the courtyard floor. Even without direct sunlight, the subtle contrast between polished gold and warm stones creates a sense of depth and serenity. The piece seems to breathe with a quiet dignity, its presence gentle yet commanding, and you feel a slow, comforting alignment with the rhythm of its creation. Every detail, every imperceptible motion seems to whisper, "You've arrived at calm. You're here. You can rest." The goldsmith finally leans back, arms folded, eyes soft as he surveys the finished work. Tap, lift, adjust. Minimal movements now, as perfection has already been realized. The courtyard absorbs a deep hush, the tools and materials resting, the gold gleaming faintly in the moonlight. You take a long, slow breath, feeling your shoulders relax, your mind settling. The attentive labor, the thoughtful patience, and the centuries of craft coalesce in this serene moment, a gentle reassurance that care and artistry endure beyond time. As you exhale, the necklace seems to shimmer with a quiet promise that skill, patience, and mindful presence have their own lasting grace. The pendants sway, granules catch fleeting light, and carnelian beads glow softly, forming a visual lullaby that carries you toward rest. You feel the calm of the courtyard settle into yourself, slow and gentle, like a wave retreating to reveal a smooth, untouched shore. Every detail of the gold, the beads, the shadows melds into a quiet meditation, a soft narrative that invites you to release the day's tension and simply be present. The night air cools your skin, and the courtyard's rhythm eases slower now, softer. The necklace remains poised, balanced, and complete, a testament to human patience, care, and creativity. You sense the lineage of artisans whose hands guided this piece, their collective attention distilled into this calm, shimmering moment. It feels safe, soft, and steady, a reminder that beauty and skill are both enduring and comforting. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the quiet of this courtyard, the gentle sway of gold and carnelian, and the patient rhythm of creation lull you into ease. You are here, at the edge of day and night, with time slowed and all small concerns settled. In this quiet, the kingdom of Kush and its goldsmiths care wrap around you like a soft, reassuring blanket, and you feel ready to drift, slowly and calmly, into sleep.